Hello, good morning everybody. I'm very conscious that there are still some people making their way to their seats, but we've got a big live streaming audience watching us today, so I wanted to make sure that we started bang on time. It looks like we're all in as well, so happy, good news. Welcome to this fabulous event, which I think is going to be a real thought-provoker this morning. My name's Carl Jones. I'm the editor of Shropshire Business Magazine, part of the presenting team at BBC Radio Shropshire. My pleasure to be your host this morning for the event which asks the big question, what's next for Shropshire? This is designed to be a snapshot into some of the economic growth strategy discussion, some of the plans that have been put in place for 2022 to 2027. So over the course of the next hour or so, you'll be hearing about all sorts of statistics, trends, plans, but it's really about instigating a discussion with the many business partners and companies that we've got here this morning, to start feeding back. I know that the team at Invest in Shropshire really want to hear what you guys here have got to say, and the people that are watching on the stream. For people who are watching on the live stream, if you've had a good look around your desktop, your tablet, you'll find that there's an opportunity to pose any questions over the course of the morning or observations, and we'll be keeping an eye on those. There'll be an opportunity to share those with the audience later on. Just to give you a very quick overview about how things are going to work this morning, we've got 2 or 3 presentations which will be coming up over the next 10 or 15 minutes. Then we will be moving into a workshop session. And you will note when you arrived here this morning that you have a very smart badge with a bright red number on it. That's the number which tells you where you need to go when we split off into the breakout sessions. So if you've got a number 1 on your lapel, then room 1 is in here. Room 2, room 3 is fairly obvious. Room 3 is where the coffee was being served. That's the first place I went when I got here this morning. And then at the end of that, after the workshop sessions, now you don't need to move around for the workshop sessions because the people who are delivering the sessions will come to you. So go to your room, stay in your room, and all the important people will come and visit. And of course, if you are watching on the live stream, you'll keep the feed in here, so you'll get a chance to see all 3 of the presentations as they come rotating into here. And then at the end of that, there'll be an opportunity for moderators who've been following the sessions to come back on stage here, tell us a little bit about some of the issues which have been raised. Then we'll have a panel debate up here as well with some of the key players this morning, where you can ask questions here in the room. We can feed in some of the questions that have come through our live stream, and then we'll have a big wrap up and a bit of a brain dump to see what's come out of it and what we think. Without further ado then, let's introduce our first speaker, whose topic really is to review the economic growth strategy and look at some of the work of the Economic Recovery Task Force. So I'll hand over the floor to Councillor Ed Potter.
Thank you very much, and good morning. It's great to join you here, both in person here at the football ground, but also virtually as well, which seems to be very much a sign of the times, as many of us have spent a good few hours on the virtual screen conducting meetings over the last couple of years. It has certainly been a very turbulent time for business, and no, in short part, due to the COVID pandemic, which is still rumbling on in the background. Over the last 21 months, the creation of the Economic Recovery Task Force has been a real positive that has come out of the pandemic. It has brought all partners and stakeholders with us. Business feedback is positive and has been action-focused, getting things done and trying to make a real difference within Shropshire. Tracking data has been really important, and it is one of the things that has enabled us to get an accurate picture both internationally, nationally, regionally, and most importantly, locally. The task force has been the linchpin of our approach, very collaborative, key things to come out, which is one of the key things which has come out of COVID. That willingness to work together is one of the things which I very much hope will continue for the betterment of Shropshire. Now, as a business community, do you think that we are on the right track? And what else do we need to be doing in the next 5 years? On the slide before you, you can see that there are clearly some positives. The delivery of new homes and the amount of private investment entering into Shropshire is up. There is obviously work to be done in other areas, but one of the key things I wanted to highlight was the £175 million public sector investment, with investment coming from bodies such as the LEP, the Department for Transport, EDRF, and the Heritage Action Zone, and Homes England, to name but a few. And of course, over the last 18 months, direct to businesses, over 34,000 business grants have been provided within Shropshire. The last 21 months in Shropshire, as I have said, has been increasingly turbulent. We started in February 15 with flooding, and before you knew it, the COVID pandemic was upon us. And you'll see on the timeline that various lockdowns, openings, has certainly provided a large amount of uncertainty for Shropshire businesses. I'm acutely aware that with COVID still hanging over us, this uncertainty continues. However, I think it's important to maintain and capitalise on the bounce back we have seen in recent months and drive forward for growth within Shropshire. The Economic Recovery Task Force for Shropshire has consisted of a number of local businesses and organisations brought together for the betterment of this county. And it is important now that we reach out to the wider business community and that you can help shape the future and plans for Shropshire moving forward. Restart, revitalise and growth are three very simple words. However, running a business that is in the events and hospitality sector, these words perhaps might not be as simple. Restarting has been difficult, revitalising your business has been difficult, and we know that growth can be difficult. But I think one of the key messages we want to give out to the business community today is that we are here to assist and we want to help wherever we possibly can, and we want your ideas and a collaborative approach to make this happen. The short and long-term solutions we have been undertaking in recent months are outlined on the screen. I wanted to highlight some of the key programmes which we have been undertaking. The Economic Task Force has supported activities such as the Town Centre Recovery Programme, working with partners such as the Shropshire Council, the BID and Town Councils. County-wide business support initiatives have been implemented. Silverpreneurs, Digital Hub, co-working products, supporting Oswestry and Shrewsbury bids, Shropshire wider tourism support, to name but a few. Wider economy grants, such as Market Trader CIC, which is a launch of local delivery schemes in the TF9 area. Stiperstones Inn, the GPS guided walks to the ANOB. Oswestry Borderland Tourism, Shropshire Cycle Hub with rickshaws in Shrewsbury and Oswestry. Niche Patisserie in Oswestry, building back into creative use and providing a high-end Betty-style tea room in Oswestry, and the county-wide RCC to kickstart Wheels to Work programme, scooters and electric bikes. There is also the continued support to the wider businesses through the discretionary business grant for those businesses that were unable to access the mainstream business-related grants. 12 million support was given to businesses that did not initially qualify. This is not something that all councils did, but I'm sure it was a vital lifeline during the uncertainty of the past 12 months to Shropshire businesses. I'm acutely aware of the time, and I'm expecting a crook to hook me off in a moment. But now we move forward to longer term planning, which is why we have brought you here today, to tell us, are we on the right track, and hear what you think of the key opportunities that we need to grasp and make Shropshire an even better place to live and do business. I certainly hope to meet many of you in the coming courses over the morning, and I am excited for the future of Shropshire business. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ed. I can't believe you called me a crook. I can't believe that. If you have got anything to raise throughout the course of the morning and you're watching on the live stream, don't forget responding to anything that Ed had to say. Please do post us a question, because we'll be keeping an eye on the interactive iPads here throughout the course of the morning. Okay, on to our next presentation now. This topic here is all about economic growth and population health and how we maintain a strong and growing economy. And to tell us all about that, Shropshire Council Assistant Director of Economy and Place, Tracy Dog.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. In fact, I'll just stand a little bit to the side because the lectern's a bit tall for me. And I think the first slide you can see, I mean, this was this morning, you know, so Hayley and the team, we're all in the pool, just getting limbered up, ready for today, because I think that's the start of what I'm going to talk to you about, and that's about population health and economic prosperity. And perhaps, you know, never before have we recognised the importance of those two things coming together and colliding. So I think this is a good slide actually to show that virtuous circle. And we've got, you know, over to one side, we've got the healthy population bit. So how can we make our population healthy and well for work? And what do they need for that support? And then, you know, when they are healthy, that whole thing around that economic growth and how that increased productivity, increased investment, and increased that health and well-being. And I think just to say, I mean, COVID has obviously been significant in our lives. And never before, as I've said, has health been so important to economic prosperity. And I think we have here a slide that's about impact and opportunities. And some of those impacts, we had 21,800 people that were furloughed during COVID pandemic. Claimant increased 125%. Obviously, it's dropped down now to about 3.3%. Universal credit claimants were significantly up. Significant employment in manufacturing was putting, and retail was really putting pressure, and health and wellbeing was really putting pressure on other industries as staff were diverted onto other duties. And the activity in our town centres was impacted. You know, we had quite traumatic times if we think back to the beginning of COVID pandemic when we were trying to think about how our town centres would survive. And there were, you know, we saw some retail businesses close, vacancies starting to creep up, and it was a real worrying time for businesses. But what we've actually seen now, as we're coming out of COVID pandemic, that acceleration in terms of the change in industry working and different ways of working and different types of industry growing out of COVID pandemic. So that's the opportunity bit, really. And we've seen, you know, companies seeking to increase their, grow their businesses during this current time. And also the sector strengths, probably sectors that actually we didn't think were really, really highly important to us, have now really, really pushed up the agenda. So as we're seeing some of that food manufacturing, care, digital, you know, is really, again, as I said, really, really significant in current times. So as we look at how we drive forward economic growth, and that's what we're here today to do, the council and some of our partners clearly play an important part in doing that. We have to look at accelerating the council's infrastructure projects so that we can provide opportunities for businesses and we can maintain that market confidence. If the council is seen to invest in some of our areas, some of our large sites, some of our, you know, the sites that we own, then it increases that strength in the industry to think, well, there's something to see here. If the council's investing in it, clearly they are confident around how our industry is going to develop. And we are looking at increasing to de-risk some of the sites as well, so that we can look at partnerships, we can look at different ways of delivering sites as we take development forward. And we're looking at that bespoke support to investors to enable them to commit their funds to sites. So fast-tracking them to the market and making sure things are in place so that businesses can feel that they have a real good experience from concept right to delivering on site. And we're looking at developing and delivering a range of new employment sites, business parks and incubation space for businesses to start. And then we're also promoting our offer to the market, creating new job opportunities, supply chain and spend in the local economy. So how can we, as one of the largest employers in Shropshire, make sure that we can help businesses to procure better in the market and help to fast track some of that so that actually it moves things forward quickly. So there's opportunities investing in new homes and delivering stronger communities. So again, we're looking at, you know, housing is obviously a significant and important strength in our economy. And we're looking at how we can drive forward new build and refurbishment housing programmes through employment and training, high quality and affordable homes, intergenerational communities, priority for key workers. And we've seen that through our hospital, support for our hospital, ensuring that they can employ and attract the right type of people for that work. Supporting and specialist homes and acquisition of refurbishment of properties in the heart of our communities, and then exemplar development, how we can be ready for be carbon neutral, how we can look forward really to ensuring that we do things innovatively and differently. And we need to ensure that we're delivering our plans through our local plan and also through the work that we do with our registered housing providers. So transformational plans for the place. And again, this is part of our economic strategy. That is about transforming our place and looking forward really in terms of our economic prosperity. And some of those big ticket items are the Shrewsbury the town plan, the big town plan, and Oswestry master planning. So they're the start of what we're looking at in terms of developing our towns. And we're looking at further towns in our more rural areas as well. And this is to help jobs and homes and that healthy environment for people to live, work and visit. And we recognise the importance of having a home, having a job, and that makes us healthy. And then there's further investment, and we, as part of the integrated care system work that we're doing, so this is partnership with Telford and Wrekin and our health partners, Public Health, NHS, CCG, how we can work together across those sectors and those authorities to ensure that we bring investment forward. And then there's employment and skills. So how do we get people fit for work and healthy and increase that well-being? And how can we help those people that are in our rural areas that are in perhaps the more deprived areas? Surprisingly, some in the south where actually, you know, they're in areas that are highly regarded and, you know, beautiful places to live, but are very, very difficult to access jobs. And that is about making sure that people are skilled up. And it is not only the people coming out of school, education, that 16 to 24 age, but it's those that have decided to choose a different lifestyle for themselves. And actually they've sort of reflected during COVID pandemic and decided they want to do something different. They want to, you know, work in a different way and work in a different place. And they actually have ideas, and Ed said earlier about, for example, the silverpreneurs. You know, we're seeing a huge uptake in people bringing forward hobbies and ideas that they always wanted to develop their own business and actually are now starting to take that to market. We're working closely with our health partners to evolve the whole health and social care skills offer. Again, it's attracting people to Shropshire to work in our care sector. And we're looking at delivering a new skills and enterprise strategy. So as we work with our digital sector, looking at how we can be better connected. And you know, you will hear today about how we can ensure that people have super fast broadband. I think we have about 1,400 properties in Shropshire that are not connected. How can we really focus with the government to ensure that we can actually get to those hard to reach areas so that they actually are able to connect to the internet like we just all expect to do. And then we've got the addressing youth unemployment. As I said, we've got youth hubs. We're looking at how we can support the youth so that we can keep people in Shropshire, so that when they leave school, they don't go away to university and not come back. It's really important that we ensure they understand the opportunities we have here in Shropshire. And then there's placemaking. Of course, we need to have that wonderful place to live and attract people. And we have the new economic strategy that will help to deliver some of that, but also our new local plan and all our plans that we'll put in place to make our place a beautiful place to live and work. Because, of course, people can choose now where they can work from home, and they are choosing that sort of lifestyle, which Shropshire, you know, has in abundance. The local plan has large strategic allocations, delivering 30,800 homes in the lifetime of the plan, which is 2016 to 2038. But it's not just about homes, is it? It's about delivering employment, it's about delivering education and open spaces and all those other things that a local plan does. And that's all at the heart of our industry. All those different types of allocations need support from businesses and investment so that we can actually make sure that the place is a beautiful place to live. And some of that work as well is underpinned by our place plans that we have in Shropshire. So we have 18 place plans, and these are plans that actually look at infrastructure and development and growth within our towns. And then finally, green infrastructure. Of course, again, that comes back to the health and well-being. We all want to be able to work at home and then go out for a walk at lunchtime, you know, cycle, do all those, have those opportunities to get around our place differently now rather than jumping into our car. And the digital infrastructure, as I've said, we want to ensure that people have easy access to all digital infrastructure, and it's ensuring that actually we can deliver that. So I suppose coming to the ICS role, the integrated care systems role, and this, as I said, is about our partnership, we all have a part to play in that. And we're in the process of just developing an economic board that feeds into and works with our public health sector. And we've probably never had anything like that before. I think the integrated care system is going to be the new thing in town. We need to be really cognizant of the importance that has to our businesses, because if we have healthy people, we have people that want to come to work for us. And then, as I said earlier, about the procurement of the supply chain, ensuring that we ease the way so that actually we can keep business local, local businesses employing local businesses, employing local people. And training and preparing young people to take up opportunities in all sectors. And then finally, the exemplar development opportunities, so as we develop on climate change. So I think just to sort of sum up really, this is about how we see those links as being really, really important between health and economic prosperity. There's a wide range of strategies and programs that we have in place to help that, and it's about how we look at our strategy going forward today and how we can improve that and embellish that. There's a clear role for ICS partners, the council, and investment and businesses to come together to drive economic prosperity. And through a programme of recovery, reset and reform, we want to take that forward as a group. And that's about ensuring that you engage as well with strategic plans as they come forward, as you have today, by showing, you know, the number of people here interested in our economic strategy. So thank you very much for listening, and look forward to speaking to you further today.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Lots of food for thought there. Interesting you mentioned the silverpreneurs. We were talking to them in the Shropshire Business Live TV studio last week, and some of the programmes, some of the ideas that are coming out of there are quite unbelievable. Don't forget, if you're watching on the live stream, anything you want to comment on that you've heard already, please do send us a comment, because we do want to get through as many as we can a bit later today. Before we get into our workshop sessions, though, which are coming in a minute, one more presentation for you to give us the wider picture for Shropshire, really, and introduce some of the proposed values and themes. Let's welcome Shropshire Council's Executive Director of Economy and Place, Mark Barrow.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I'd like to start firstly by congratulating you all for surviving, actually. You've kind of made it through. The feedback from the front line is now that Shropshire is thriving. There's a huge amount of kind of sort of growth out there at the moment, and businesses are under a lot of pressure. So hopefully this is all really meaningful for you and kind of exactly what you're thinking about in your business at the moment. I want to kind of just kick off by talking about drivers of change. And recessions drive change. We had a kind of mini recession as such in terms of contracted economic growth. But of course we had a pandemic and we've had Brexit. So in terms of, you know, what we're looking to in the future, you know, what we did in the past is not going to get us to where we need to be. I was looking at some information recently on the rise of internet retail, for example. You know, it peaked at almost 48% at one point of all kind of retail traffic. It's dropped back to 30-something at the moment. You know, work is what we do. It's not a place. That's actually a really kind of common theme that's percolating many businesses at the moment. And that kind of whole acceleration, really, of kind of change that was going on in the world of kind of digital technology and connectivity is kind of really, I think, been brought to the fore. So there's an interesting kind of trend within this too, which is throughout the pandemic, Shropshire's continued to see kind of record levels of things like housing development. We've continued to see a record influx of people into the county. I was talking to Ben from the DWP in the lead up to this, and he was telling me that our rate of recovery is 49th out of 370 odd kind of areas the DWP are managing. You know, that's a fantastic stat. Mark Hooper was telling me that we're 211% up on bed nights than we were in 2019. I was on a call with some business board colleagues and business improvement district colleagues. Everyone was saying we just can't get enough people. So there's a lot of pressure out there, and that kind of change is at the heart of it. And in that kind of swing, what we've seen, I think, is an opportunity for Shropshire to really capitalise on that kind of thing that people are now looking for, which is that mix between, you know, work and quality of life. And we have a great offer, and the evidence is there that we're in a great place to capitalise on that. So that's something for us to really think about harnessing as, let's say, a natural asset. You know, any good plan, and if we're thinking about this new economic strategy, builds on your natural assets. It builds on the things that you're good at. So how do we capture all of that? Interestingly, we've seen a huge influx of people from other parts of the country wanting to come and live here. You know, well, what does that mean? What opportunities does that provide? You know, what skills are they bringing? Those kind of questions, I think, are very relevant. I think there's another bit in here, which is we talk about, you know, some of the changes as a council. It's not a spectator sport for us. You know, we've actually rolled our sleeves up and got involved in a lot of things. You know, one of the key ones that's most visible is our ownership of what was 3 retail centres in the heart of Shrewsbury. And the plan was always to do that, not for investment, but to manage the transition that's underway in the high street. And that's proving really quite successful. And actually, we've really almost now got 1 retail centre and we've got 2 redevelopment sites. So that's moving on fantastically too. And by the way, footfall through retail, through the pandemic, has held up above the national average all the way through. You know, not just Shrewsbury, but our market towns have performed really strongly. So that's all good, and it should give us lots of kind of confidence about our position going forward. In terms of the green and digital, because that is the theme of the recovery, really, and, you know, how relevant, while COP is going on to talk about, you know, green, actually we come from a position of strength too. We don't talk a lot about this, and one of our challenges, I think, in Shropshire is to get the light from under the bushel and kind of swagger a bit in the world and talk a bit more about who we are and what we're good at. You know, actually, as a local authority, Shropshire is the 2nd biggest generator of renewable energy in the country out of all local authorities. That's a fantastic statistic. We don't want to be second, we want to be first. And we've got a huge you know, pipeline of projects to kind of add to that. The interesting bit, though, is beyond the CO2 and all the good climate stuff, is that we're helping create a supply chain of skills. We're helping create demand in key sectors that are emerging. And that's one of the interesting bits here is, you know, with what we have and working with other partners, you know, what can we do to help stimulate that stuff that is taking us towards the new economy? So there's something about that that's really interesting. And we've got these kind of burgeoning clusters of kind of expertise and skills and kind of natural collections of some sectors. So how are we going to build on that? Throughout the pandemic and through the work of the task force, we've been keeping a close eye on kind of feedback from the front line and what's been the impact of Brexit. And Richard Sheehan particularly has been giving us, you know, regular feedback on what they've been doing in the chamber with chamber members. And that kind of sense of, you know, the bureaucracy around import and export and just the sheer level of support that's needed has really kind of landed hard with us. But actually, people have done really well kind of in that sense of kind of managing that transition. And to some extent, you know, we can still talk about Brexit as an opportunity. You know, what does that really kind of mean for us? And we do work closely with representatives from the NFU, actually, and we're watching what happens in the world of the replacement of EU subsidies and basic payments to the new kind of ELMS-related system of agricultural support. But actually, when you think of it, you know, half of Shropshire dairy farms, for example, are already fully automated. You know, there's a big shift going on in that world too that's kind of linking into food production. So, you know, as one of those kind of big areas that define our place, there's a lot of innovation in that space too, and we're keen to kind of support that. I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, really what have been established by many people as the global megatrends. You know, this is what's happening in the world, and this is a version of this is the 2019 version of that, because I haven't seen a version of it since. But demographics, we know what's happening in terms of demographics, in terms of aging populations. You know, that's a global trend too. One of the things that we want to recognise here is actually, well, what opportunities does that provide as well? Actually, I was told yesterday that birth rates in Shropshire are holding up reasonably well. We're actually not doing too bad, you know, thinking about that. But there's another interesting bit is I talked about that influx of people. What are the skills that we can kind of bring here? How do we keep the young people that we've got that are talented sticky? That's the phrase, isn't it? How do we want them to have a career and grow and develop in life here? It's an important part of it. The rise of the individual really is about the agenda for personalisation. And that whole bit about personalisation, we're feeling as a council, people want personalised responses, don't they, all the time now. We're all consumers in a range of ways. Now, actually, given that opportunity to kind of work in a digital way or in a different way and not be rooted to a physical place, actually that helps unlock some of the things that have potentially been a bit of a problem for us. And that kind of speaks also to then that change in technology. Here's a thought for you. Those children that are born today will be emerging into the workforce of 2040. Once they've been through James's college or whatever, they will be emerging as 19-year-olds in 2040. All of the research that's been done by people like OECD, Bank of England, Morgan Stanley, all those kind of really big, kind of powerful players in the world, say that something like, on average, when you overlay their analysis on Shropshire's economy, 47% of all existing jobs will either not exist or be fundamentally different. So the question is, what are the skills that we're kind of, what's that direction that we're taking that workforce towards? And in this strategy, what are the steps that we need to take to kind of build that economy? So there's an interesting kind of piece there about understanding where we are. And we talk a lot about, this isn't just about the digital bit, it's about actually that experience-based economy that we're really good at too. It's about some of those kind of physical things that we do, etc. So there's a really interesting kind of bit there about, well, what does that mean for us and how are we prepared? The public debt bit, you all know, the pandemic has kind of created a climate in public finances that we had kind of record level of post-war debt. There isn't a huge amount of cash. We were hoping to get more out of the Chancellor last week. We haven't given up. And actually, there's an interesting opportunity I'm going to talk about a little bit about, opportunities for further deals with government in our area. But the point is, we have to use what we've got really wisely to kind of help get the best outcome that we can. The economic interconnectedness and power shift is an interesting one, isn't it? And many people in this room that operate in global markets, that import-export piece, it isn't just a Europe question, is it? It's an international global economy question. So the point there is, how do we help people? If that centre shifted, as it did from 20 years ago, the centre of economic power sat somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic. It's now towards Eastern Europe because of the rise of China, India, and to some extent Russia's power too. There's a little bit there about, okay, so how are we playing? What's our role in that global economy? I know that sounds kind of quite high level, but actually we need to think about that because lots of people are in that space. And then the whole climate change bit and resources is at the heart of that green agenda. We've got a climate change declaration. I know many of you in your organisations have got one too. We're actually performing reasonably well in that sense. We've just got to keep at what we're doing. And we're looking to be a centre of all sorts of kind of new technologies going forward. I'm not sure if a crook's going to come and grab me at some point, by the way, if I'm talking for too long. Yeah, right. So that opportunity for county deals, there's an opportunity here. Government have thrown out. It's similar to what happened in the urban conurbations 10 years ago, which is, is it a deal for some kind of growth? Is it a deal for delegation? Do we want some new powers? Are there some flexibilities? Are there some bureaucracies that could be got rid of? I'd like you to think about that because you could help us kind of shape that ask. I'll just pause. The wider landscape is also, we don't know what the future of the LEP is, but we're continuing to engage positively, jointly, to kind of help make the best of whatever that future will be. And that's all about kind of just changing politics of the moment. But there's an opportunity and we're going to go for it. There are 4 themes that came from the work of the task force that I'd just like you to think about too, which is about business resilience, sustainability, making our growth and recovery inclusive, but that healthy bit that Tracy talked about, healthy people, healthy economy, healthy environment, they're kind of the strap lines we're working in within the council. This is my last slide before someone does lift me off the stage, which is then our key 3 themes are this really, that whole pipeline of people and skills. Businesses locate where there is a supply of skills primarily, and we get that, and we want to kind of really understand that and work with you. We recognise that supporting businesses is about an ecosystem. It's about that level of kind of different layers of support, including things like, is there access to finance? Is there the right kind of support and advice? If I'm in a particular market, is there somebody that can kind of help me find a way through that? So we're really interested in building on, the capacities we've got in the Growth Hub, for example, and taking that environment forward. And then the locations bit is really obviously there's a lot of focus on Shrewsbury. It's our county town, but we want to create a lift for all of the market towns and the rural areas. So there's a lot of thinking around also about how in this rising tide are all boats going to rise. And that's an interesting bit. Our economy is diverse. We've got a fantastic kind of broad array of different towns with individual qualities. Many of them are tourist honeypots too. Let's think about how we bring that forward. So you haven't grabbed my collar quite yet, Carl, but that's me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. I don't know where this reputation comes from. Actually, the trapdoor doesn't open until we're technically behind schedule. And I think we are still right on schedule. So thank you for that. As I've said after the first two presentations as well, anybody who's watching on the live stream, if you've got anything you want to say about that stimulates debate for later on, please do get in touch. And thanks to everybody that has done already. Right, we're now going to take a break for our workshops. So just to tell you how this is going to work, all these workshops, 3 workshops we've got, are all going to operate simultaneously. They'll be about 30 minutes long. And you will notice, as I said, that you've got a number. If you have a number 1, then don't move. Stay right here in the main room. If you've got a number 2, through that door there. And if you've got a number 3, right at the end of the corridor. Everybody who's watching on the live stream, you will stay here with our main feed. So you'll be watching the presentations that are taking part in here. So just before we do break for the presentations, I just thought it'd be nice just to officially introduce everyone who's going to be delivering the presentation so they can stand up, wave or say hello. If you are in room 1, the first presentation you'll be watching is all about supporting local businesses with Richard Sheehan from Shropshire Chamber and Mike Goodall from the Federation of Small Businesses, who I'm sure need no introduction, but I'll give you one anyway. Wave and say hello, folks. Where are you? Excellent. If you're in room 2, we'll be starting off with employment and skills. This is Kirsty Simpson from Chester University Business School and Ben Vaughan from the Department of Work and Pensions. Say hello, folks. Excellent. And if you are going into room 3, the first presentation in there will be looking at strategic locations, and that's Hayley Owen from Shropshire Council and Tim Pritchard as well, the Assistant Director of Economy and Place. So last but not least, make yourself known, folks. Don't be shy. Excellent. Well, so now you know where you're going, hopefully, or staying. As I said, the presenters will be moving. You don't need to move. The idea is then we will reconvene. There'll be a coffee break after the second workshop for about 15 or 20 minutes. And the presentations and the feedback sessions are being filmed in the main hall here. And they'll be available for about a week or so online after the event as well. So enjoy the workshops. The plan is to reconvene in here at about 11:30 and then have a good discussion. See you later. Thank you. Sorted out microphones and things like that, so we're ready to go with our first workshop. I'm going to hand over the floor to Mike Goodall from the Federation of Small Businesses and Richard Sheehan from Shropshire Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning. We're delighted to have been invited here today. We are due to do a session as the two Ronnies shortly, but for now I think we'll just stick to the brief as best we possibly can. Our thanks to our colleagues from Shropshire Council for their visionary presentations. I think I'd have to say here, and this is no blowing smoke at the council, but if this had taken place 5 years ago, we'd have seen nothing like the intensity, the detail, the awareness of what circumstances are. So I think we should all be taking comfort from the fact that people in the organisation are making a difference. Should have introduced myself. My name is Richard Sheehan. I'm the Chief Executive of Shropshire Chamber of Commerce.
Mike Goodall, Development Manager for the Federation of Small Businesses.
And we are tasked to facilitate this, as in not give opinions particularly, but to facilitate gaining from you information about what the future looks like from your business perspective, from your sector, as you are currently representing that as well. So it's really important that we gain your feedback. But I think just to look back at what we've just seen, we've seen that there's a tremendous amount of planning, investment, opportunity coming. For me, there's one key ingredient missing, and that's the people that we put into these wonderful facilities and these developments. We know from engagement with our business community, Mike, I know you'll support this, that they are struggling. They really are struggling to recruit at this moment in time. Never ever have I, in my limited time in the chamber, my long time on this planet, seen a situation quite like this, where recruitment has actually completely changed. Businesses are now having to sell themselves to potential employees, where the old advert going in and people coming along and selling themselves to the business is that's a thing of the past. It's gone. If you actually are serious about recruiting quality people, you've got to sell yourself as a business. Mike, we've got to run through, I think, some questions. So I'm going to encourage you, because I got new reading glasses. Anybody ever had new reading glasses and then tried to use them on the first day? Good, isn't it? So we're going to run through a number of questions. In your packs, you will have copies of a SWOT analysis that was put together by our friends from the University of Chester through University Centre Shrewsbury. And primarily, it will feed into what we've heard this morning. What we need to understand from you is do you recognise what was in that SWOT? Do you recognise the images that were portrayed of Shropshire and its position currently? And more importantly, what's missing? What do you need and what's missing? But Mike, I think there's a string of questions, and I think I'll ask you to, because I've realised, put them on, I can't see, take them off, I can't.
So the first question is really about whether or not you recognise some of the stats, the presentations you've heard today. Does it feel familiar? Has anything come as a surprise? Is there anything really missing? But in terms of the analysis that you've got in your packs around supporting local businesses and the findings of the Economic Recovery Task Force, we looked at various things that we thought were important, and providing comprehensive business support services was one of the key requirements. And so whether or not we've got that right, whether or not business support is fit for purpose, whether improvements could be made, what's working well is as important as talking about what's not working so well. But how do we support new and existing employers and employment in the county? And how do we support the business workforce and well-being? That's an increasingly important subject that's come through, particularly through the pandemic, is people's well-being in terms of physical and mental health as we go forward. Healthy workforce is a productive workforce, as they say. And how do we support businesses to adopt corporate social responsibility going forward? Is it more of the same that we've had before, or are there opportunities to do things a little bit differently? We've got some schemes already running quite successfully in the county around peer-to-peer support, which is getting businesses to share business leaders to share their knowledge more widely, which is working well. Could we do more of that? Is that worthwhile? Is there an opportunity to expand that? And also, how do we facilitate sector growth? Are there specific niche sectors that we should really be focusing our activities on to drive the economy forward, particularly perhaps in light of the green economy, COP26, and all the announcements that have been made in the past 48 hours?
Right, thanks. And for our colleagues online, if you do have any questions or any contribution, please do feed it in. This is absolutely your opportunity to have your voice heard and to help shape the future of support. A quick question for the businesses in the room, because I know we're joined by one or two of our council colleagues. How many of you in the room as a business have engaged with business support over the last, let's take out the COVID grant bit, over the last 3 years? How many of you have actually engaged with business support? 2. Okay. Was that helpful at the time?
Yeah,
do you want more of it? Absolutely. What does it look like? What do you need?
Well, I'm a startup, so I'm quite rapidly growing business.
Okay.
So yeah, so I run a startup. We're growing quite quickly. For me, as much advice developing a business as I can get is really welcome, really. So I've just got emailed an application we've got for our business growth grant that we're putting in because we're taking on some more people. All of that's really useful. So, yeah, I can't really fault it. The only thing I would say it would be slightly more flexibility. That's not a criticism, but business is changing rapidly. So some of the criteria for some of the guidance is a little bit out of date, possibly, but that's minor criticism, really.
Yeah, I think we're in a rapidly accelerating, changing world, and obviously things do change, and keeping up with it is quite a challenge. And yourself?
Oh, hi there. I know Simon, and it's one of the challenges that perhaps he's had as well. Is I moved to the area about 6 years ago. I had a business set up in the southeast. Wanted to kind of move into this area and build networks and recruit people. And one of the challenges I had pre-pandemic was the amount of co-working space and opportunities to hubs to find people and to connect. And I suspect that's even more of a problem now. So that's something I'm really interested in finding out about. What's the situation now? Has it moved on? Are there opportunities to bring people together? It was interesting hearing that there are a lot of people moving to the area. So for me, it's like, how can we find out more about those people? What are their needs? What are their roles? What are their skills? Is there a different way we can tap in to that knowledge to find out who these people are? And can we bring them together? Are there potential community networking groups? Can we do more rural co-working, that kind of stuff? So there's lots of different ways of perhaps bringing people together that we hadn't thought about before because perhaps we didn't need to. But now, as you were saying earlier, people are being very careful about which jobs, opportunities they take up. So, we need to understand what the psychology is, where people are, so that we can build opportunities and networks that are suitable for them.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that, and I think you're absolutely spot on with that, and I think there is a significant marketing piece for our local authority colleagues here, because obviously there is a perception that people coming to the area, they're selling up, they're coming from the metropolitan areas, they're retiring and settling down. Some have recently. But on the basis of that, there are so many people who perhaps are moving here but can still work remotely. How do we tap into that talent and try and draw them into some of these fantastic projects that are being developed across the county that will need people to fill those sheds and fill those offices? No question about it. We have a real challenge there. And the marketing piece also then will be about attracting people to come here and bring their businesses. There's still a big piece to do around that. Inward investment is the title, but actually, there's a whole raft of we've got land available, we're developing more, we need to do far more than we are now about promoting that, and that's a big piece. Mike, sorry.
No, it's just on that point. I mean, there's relatively few people put their hands up there in terms of accessing support. So just as a general, two general questions. Is business support complicated, complex? Is it completely unfathomable, or is it just that it's not needed? And if business support is needed, is it always about finance, or is it something else? Is it around, a gentleman mentioned there, around the networks and collaborative working? So 2 questions for you then. So how complex is it? Can you navigate it? And is it all about money, or is it about actually something else? Anybody? Any views? Apparently not.
Yeah.
Probably quite difficult because you've probably not got too many people running business. It's obviously both. Money is incredibly important, especially in my case with a startup. We haven't taken any investment yet, so we're growing organically. So we've been really careful with our money. But likewise, advice, it has to be both. And I think just running on with comment, and hopefully I'm not going to be too vocal. I mean, because part of my business is involved with understanding how organisations work. So we have big corporate organisations. So I can see from their side how large organisations are really changing how they deal with their workforce. So never before has well-being and lifestyle been so important. It's the only way you can really attract and retain decent talent is to give people what they want, and people have got choice now. So I think the fact of having that mixture of advising a business on not just organisational structures, but in terms of what the new workforce are requiring. So, yeah, that ability to share and collaborate, not just having a core team of business advisors, but actually being able to network, being able to. So, for example, and without being rude, I've not gone to Chamber of Commerce. I just didn't feel like it sort of fitted me because we're a digital startup, and most of the people I employ are half my age. So, but to be able to connect and find like-minded businesses is incredibly valuable to share experiences, and because pace of change is so massive at the moment, it's really fluid. So things can change. Daily, weekly, so I think to be able to make a network and connect people up is paramount in terms of supporting local businesses to grow. Coming from having a business in London, that network's already there, but I don't think there's any reason that you can't start to have that network in more rural areas. We know we can work remotely. Everybody has the ability to work remotely, but people still want to communicate. They still want to meet up. They want like coffee shop experience. And from my understanding, how businesses are working, there's an opportunity to regenerate town centres, not just with shops, but with office spaces where people can drop in and work. So it's a new world. And as I say, it's an opportunity to relook at how you can support businesses locally, not just with grants, not just with advice, but just with this sort of networking, connecting people up.
Pick up on that just interestingly, and fantastic graphics, by the way, that the council's put together in the pack today. But the one that which really stood out for me, which was Shropshire's population is about the same as Nottingham's, but actually its geographical area is 44 times as large. So actually that connectivity and how you facilitate that network is important. And I suppose it's kind of, as we do in the Chamber and FSB, this sort of hybrid model we have at the moment with virtual and physical events is interesting. We've always found it a bit of a challenge with physical events sometimes in the shires in getting people there because of that remoteness. But anyway, that's something we can look at to do more of, is how to facilitate those connections, if you like, between businesses.
Thank you for the contribution. Where's your business based? Okay, right. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I think Shrewsbury, I think, is reasonably well served, in fairness, with opportunities to connect. I think where we perhaps are all missing a trick is the market town areas, who deserve more support than they actually get in terms of that ability. But yeah, I think. Sorry. I think the gentleman's just told us. I think we come together as stakeholders who work in partnership. We've got opportunities in and around the high streets of every market town, and we allocate a facility, we secure a facility to actually make that happen. We've looked at sort of mobile activity going around. We present events all over the county, of course we do. But you need continuity. You need to know that this will happen on certain days, and it may only be 1 or 2 days a week when somebody's there, but at least you've got that outbreak, because running a business, as you'll know already, is a very lonely place, and having somebody to bounce ideas, concerns off, who's perhaps shared experiences, it's a really interesting one. Thank you for that. I think that's really important. Sorry, go on.
I just wanted to pick up on Simon's point about bringing the right people together, because there are kind of general business networking groups, but I also run a kind of creative business, and it's really important that we are connecting with the right sorts of people. So perhaps there's a bit of a mapping exercise that could take place, understanding who do we have here, what business do we have here, and how can we group the right people together. So if you are going out on one of these mobile networking things in a small village in Shropshire, who do we know is in the vicinity? How can we contact them? How can we bring them together? And then businesses can obviously develop from having the right people in the room at the right time.
Just coming back on that, so would you regard an event or something like that as being an opportunity to connect with like-minded people in your industry and sector, or would you be using it to look for business opportunity?
I think the answer is both. Is knowing, you know, the different types of people that we're interested in meeting in relation to our business, and having different events that fit that.
Right. I think there's a balance there, Claire. I think we've got a number of sector-based groups that we run. Nothing around digital and creative at the moment. I have to say it is a focus for us, but we do a lot of general ones as well. I think the whole landscape needs to be reviewed and looked at in terms of how do we create these clusters of people working together. I think that's important.
I'm just interested on Simon's point here as to, you know, is it more than just the... Get a microphone to you, or the stream guys can't hear you.
Do we have any questions coming in after? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just a question coming back to Simon, really, and the gentleman. Just trying to understand, really, the collaborative aspect. Is it purely business, or is there a social aspect to it that brings the individuals together, particularly the younger generation of entrepreneurs who come together? You know, they tend to go to the funkier, cool places. So, you know, do you have to start thinking about creating those environments that bring those people together?
Sorry, it's just about what you are both saying. I work for CREST, the Centre for Research into the Environment and Technology at University Centre Shrewsbury, and we work with a lot of businesses, and we run a couple of groups in other areas: water, geospatial, and plastics. And the way we've approached that is to engage with industry, the council, and ourselves, and we've generated groups. So maybe there's something to do here. We could talk afterwards. Maybe we could look and introduce you to relevant people at the university, etc.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be great. And I think the university is a perfect opportunity to start networking as well, because it also ties in with understanding what skills needs are and how you can start to support generating skills. In answer to your question, Chris, I think it's paramount when you're trying to attract people to come and work to you that they feel that it's a destination that is going to, you know, it's not just for quality of life, but it is having that vibrancy. So I think just taking, for example, and I know co-working is a theme, and I do go on about it, but when you look at some of the co-working spaces in London, which are thriving at the moment, they do an awful lot of networking events, or they'll bring things like, you know, a lawyer in to talk about IP protection or something like that. Those are social events as well, and quite often, you know, they'll do them at the end of the day, they'll have a beer, they might have a band on later on. So you've got an opportunity, and I think, yeah, business is changing now. You know, you can have a beer and have a chat to somebody and do business quite easily. And I think it has to be a mixture, and I think that when you're looking at how you can establish a destination to attract that talent, it's the giving people the opportunity to mix with different sectors that gets really interesting. You know, when large organisations are sort of planning out who works what there, they quite often put different divisions and different departments so they can have that sort of water cooler moment. That's where the magic happens, I think, when you'll have somebody who's in tech talking to somebody who's, you know, in I don't know, talking in terms of a different division. That's when it gets interesting. So, but I do think there is a real opportunity to try and get these connections to semi-act organically as well. So, and they will snowball, and it can be a case of mixing things like the arts with business as well. And that's, I think, where we've got an opportunity in Shropshire as well. I think we've got all the ingredients. It's just how we can put it together.
Thank you. It is remiss of me, I should have asked you when you're speaking to introduce yourself and your company so we know who you are. And so, again, I blame the glasses. Oh, okay. I think we've got a couple of questions from
this is a good time maybe
colleagues
just
online.
to throw in some of the questions or the observations really that have come in from the people that are watching on stream. A couple talking about the connectivity and the networking side of it. Anna Sadler says, With regard to networking, March's Growth Hub Shropshire is running weekly online networking sessions, attracting between 40 and 60 businesses every week. So if anybody wants to know more about it, there's Anna and Emma at March's Growth Hub can tell you more about that. And Sue Lloyd has also been in touch to say that we do have an excellent intelligence function at Shropshire Local Authority where colleagues are linked into this. So if anybody wants to know more, then the information's available about things like population, demographics, movement and that sort of thing. And then just one more here that I guess sort of throws into to the talk about how you retain and keep staff is a question from Jane Trethaway who says, how far do business partners who are here need to be considering housing availability as part of all of this? The standards, affordability, and how that plays a part in companies' ability to attract and retain staff and sustain and grow their businesses?
I think the response to that one is interesting. In particular, obviously, we know about the local plans to develop an awful lot of housing. And generally, our housing is less... we say more affordable, I'm trying to think of a polite word, than out of the area in other areas. So what we've seen on numerous occasions is people moving into the area, but finding they've got such a surplus of cash, they've actually decided either to start a small business or, you know, I can retire early because that's happened. But there's two elements to it. One is we still got to be able to make sure that our young people are able to create that work-life situation where they can actually buy a home. And my daughter worked in London, as an example. She was renting a flat with her husband, as he is now, for £1,200 a month, one-bedroom flat. She's moved up into Shropshire. She's bought a house. That was never possible in London. And she started a little business and off she goes. So absolutely right, we've got to be able to accommodate these people. But there's a whole joined up piece here because, you know, as I said right at the beginning, all these sheds, all these wonderful facilities that we are going to build need people. They need quality people, they need trained and skilled people, and we have to do more about that to make sure, because inward investment, people can go anywhere with their business at this moment in time, literally anywhere. So you have to have a complete offer in terms of your schooling, your infrastructure. Everything's got to be in place to attract a business in, and the people and the talent and the available workforce is so critical. So it's important that we do it. And we have gin, of course.
We
always. Yeah.
So I want to kind of add to that, because of what we're seeing quite a lot of, particularly with the entry-level staff and certainly people that work in hospitality and retail and things like that, is that they are starting to get priced out of the market. So if you look at just how quickly the property prices for rentals have gone up, because there's so much additional income, people selling their houses all over the country, moving here and don't really care about throwing 700, 800, 900 pounds on a one-bedroom flat until their house is ready 6 months down the line, then it's impacting on that ability to do it, as well as also the extension of the transportation links. You know, yes, we have got this massive area, I think you just touched on it, what was it, 44% the size of it, which is a massive issue, but when you look at accessibility, certainly for like nighttime economy, there isn't any, you know, taxis are difficult to get hold of, even though they're considerably better than they were 6 years ago when I moved here. Buses stop at 6, 7 o'clock. You know, so there's lots of young people outside in the towns and the rural areas who are relying on parents and various other things to get them in to come out of work and do these things, and we physically can't get them in. And then it always goes down to the thing, which is actually payroll. You know, you've seen massively, I've seen people looking at jobs for bar where we're paying people £11, £12 an hour now to get them in to do a simple bar shift and get that experience, which is what they should be getting paid. But there's also a lot of places that are trying still to attract people on, you know, base minimum wage, and they're the ones that seem to be struggling. I'm not really struggling for staff because I paid them properly. So it's something to look at as we go forward.
I can cite a meeting yesterday with a recruitment agency where they pre-pandemic, they had 13 to 14 candidates for every vacancy of a level, a decent level in fairness, that they were promoting. They struggle to get 2 or 3 now, and they struggle to get, of the 3, more than 1 to go for interview. The terms, and again, it goes back to the very beginning, recruitment's turned on its head. Businesses have got to sell themselves now, whether that's with a decent wage, whether that's with the health and well-being support that they give, the career development that they commit to in the beginning. There's a whole piece now where the world has changed and people are making choices, demanding to work from home or asking to work from home at least 3 or 4 days a week. And somebody in Shropshire can now work for a company in Birmingham or London or anywhere else and be paid considerably different So we have to be mindful of that, and we have to work very hard to make sure that happens. Mike, sorry, I'm chirping. You?
I'm just conscious we've got a couple of other questions, only about 3 minutes left. We probably need to move on to the next one, if that's possible. Okay, just a small topic here then. Key opportunities and challenges specific to Shropshire. Anybody got any views on that?
I think we've had a lot of views that actually contribute to
Yes.
that already, which I know are notes are being taken. But
yeah, it's kind of already been covered. I just wanted to add to what you were just saying there about well-being's come up a few times, and potential employees, having more choice. I think one of the big things that we need to look at is the culture of organisations. If you look at some of the most exciting organisations for young people to work in, they want to go to a place which is, Simon was saying, vibrant. Perhaps they're very empowered. Decision making is done in a different way. They feel really truly connected to the purpose of that business. So I think that's something that perhaps we could look at within Shropshire, is how do we help our businesses here start to rethink their business models, particularly as people are going to be working from home a lot more. They're going to need to be more self-organised, self-managed, and they want to feel connected to the business in some way that's greater than just beyond a pay packet. So I think culture is a piece that needs some work.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right with that, and that's now and in the future, and it's helping businesses to understand, but also helping them to feed back, like today's session, back into organisations that can try and influence those situations as well. It's a two-way thing.
Hi, I'm Julian Dean. I'm a counsellor actually, but I want to speak as a consumer, or as from the demand side. 3 points. First, in terms of the employment opportunities, it may well be the case that firms are struggling to recruit, but it's still the case that graduates are struggling to get graduate roles, and graduates are prepared to shift sector. We know that. But it is still the case that it takes them hundreds of applications to get an interview for a graduate role. So there's something missing there if we're going to retain the people who often now are coming back home after, I know this from personal experience, coming back home after completing degrees because they can't necessarily walk into a job, so they need to go back home. There's the whole boomerang generation where that's happening. That was the first one. The second is, on Saturday I went to the Green Homes event in Shrewsbury. 10 homes opened their doors to look at what they'd done in terms of retrofit and introducing low carbon heating and all that sort of stuff. The first time I went to, they had 50 visitors. That's 50 people looking to do the work on their own homes, looking to invest in greening their homes, who are really struggling. And I know that, again, from my own experience, that looking for the advice, looking for the firms who can do it, there's a real gap there. And so maybe we need sort of energy advice hubs or something, which businesses can then tap into as well to help people reach that. And then the third one, and it's a personal story, is just in terms of investment opportunities. I think that it was interesting that Ed Potter's figures showed that private investment has actually overachieved on the economic strategy. And again, I think that taps into the green story, because there are people, and again, it's a personal experience, who will have just picked up their retirement pots, whatever it might be, looking for opportunities to invest in a green way. Where's the advice, and where are the opportunities locally to do that? So I think there's a job perhaps to do to help the market, help the demand side as well as the supply side.
Couple of things. I'm going to steal a bit of time here because we've just run out of time, and to my colleagues online, I'm sorry, but I need to just address this one. I think we mustn't lose sight also in the whole green agenda of the job opportunities that creates, the higher level, the higher tech jobs, and that's really important that we connect people to that. On the graduate one, it's an interesting point, because as the Chamber, we've taken 3 graduates who on the Kickstarter programme. So you think, why? The question here is around the educational establishments. I'm not sure if there's any in here that'll shoot me. Are we bringing out of these institutions the people that businesses need now, next year and the year after? Are they actually training on what they're interested in, or are they training on what the career opportunities are of the future? Because I suspect there's a big mismatch between the two. I think a lot of people, I know from my experience, a lot of people do a degree and they don't follow a career in that degree. They go off doing something completely different. It does give them life skills, it gives them transferable skills, it gives them ability, but at the same time, there is a real question mark, and the government issued something called a Local Skills Improvement Plan tender, which we actually tried to lead for. Go away. And we tried to lead for, and you know, it's a really important piece where the voice of business helps shape the educational establishments, and I think you're right, absolutely right, and there's a big piece of work we can do to actually make that better. I apologise for overrunning, but I couldn't not let that go.
Your presence is required elsewhere. I think I suggest you start with question 3 in the next session and maybe work backwards. Then you've actually got all the bases covered. We don't want to keep everybody else waiting. If anybody else wants to say anything as well, use the interactive function or come and talk to me and I'll put it all into the system and then we can talk about it a bit later on. But let's say thanks to Richard and Mike.
We didn't get a clap in our last room, so we're already liking this room the best. Welcome everybody, education and skills. So in your pack you will have 3 feedback sheets. The one that we're going to be focusing on right now is the one in blue, yes. So on the back of that, and you'll probably be used to this already, is the SWOT analysis that's been undertaken that directly links to education and skills. So we're... do we have to... Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, we're going to do a bit of a...
You first.
No, I'm not going to do that. So, education skills, SWOT analysis. Hopefully you've got that in front of you. Now, we're going to utilise that in the next 30 minutes to focus and answer our questions. So, I guess very similar sort of process than the one that you just went to, but on a slightly different subject. So, our first question relates to the SWOT, and particularly the findings of the task force, and whether you feel that there are any gaps. Now, I know that there's a fair bit of information there to sort of absorb in a very short space of time. But from our perspective, we really want to hear what your perspectives are in relation to that gap. So any sort of immediate thoughts, anything that you sort of feel that is glaringly, obviously not either in the SWOT or the findings from the task force.
And we're talking about skills and pathways, obviously, from skills, the educational sector, right through to employers and employment. So how does that link? How does that work together? A lot of conversation from the previous group around that. So really your thoughts as to how we take that forward.
Stunned silence. So please tell us we're not going to have to do a dance of some description to get you to say something, because that could be awkward. We've not rehearsed anything. So... what do we think the gaps are? In the previous room, we were talking about the ecosystem. So with training providers, and obviously I represent a university, but we are not great at that sort of integrated supply chain. So is that a problem for employers? Question mark. Is that a gap? So I'm interested to sort of hear your thoughts about how does it work in practice for you? Because we do what we do, you know, we offer degree programs and master's level programs, and some of that will enable the individuals that work with you to have those higher level skills. But we also know that individuals in this county with those higher level skills go outside of the county and take those skills with them. So how does that impact on what you do and what you need in relation to skills? That's what we're interested in, isn't it, today?
As employers, you know, I recognise a couple of faces from business boards and other groups I'm on. How does that impact on you in employers in terms of retaining your staff and being able to deliver your business?
Sorry, you just need the mic so people online can hear you.
I'll give you some feedback that may not be that helpful, but I'm only a small employee. We've got a dozen people, but we've grown pretty quickly, so we're doing a lot of recruiting.
Yeah.
We don't care where people are anymore.
No.
I got somebody working for me from New York, London, Brighton, Pembrokeshire. What we do try and employ locally, but we are quite specialist. So we're a digital startup, so we're looking for specific programmers.
Yeah.
But one thing we notice we're paying an awful lot for them, and that's just part of the course, really. But so I can't give you a sort of this is a traditional local business. This is where the gaps are. What we have noticed when we are recruiting, though, is that it seems that there are more postgraduates who are staying in the area because why move to London and pay, or they can't even afford to pay the rent anyway.
Yeah.
So we are seeing more local people trying to either be freelancers or set up their own little business, and that seems to be running well. And I'm amazed that, you know, we're recruiting for some designers at the moment, that there's a lot of people who are actually gaining business through their Instagram accounts and stuff.
Yeah.
It's a different
Different
way
world.
anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's helpful, because we're not seeing the gaps, because we're not restricted.
No, but it is helpful though, isn't it?
Anymore.
Because we know in this county that 90.5 was it, of employers have got 10 staff or less.
Yes.
So if those 10 staff aren't from the county, then that is helpful, isn't it? To know that, because how do we then generate that start-up within the county to create opportunity within the county?
Yeah. But is that old data as well? Because, I mean, I remember when I was doing some research 4 or 5 years ago, that was the case. I'm wondering if that may actually be changing now.
Yeah.
Because historically, when you're growing, because there's loads of small businesses, aren't there, as you say, under 6 or whatever it is, and then they disappear.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether that may actually be changing, and maybe look at the data in a year's time to see if it's different.
Yeah, and certainly from the data that we have, we know we've got a slightly lower start-up rate than the UK, and a slightly higher, if I remember rightly, maintenance of those businesses. So I just wonder whether, from a skills perspective, how that is working and operationalising in relation to upskill, reskill, and making sure that you've got the workforce that you need. Because, as I say, it's that whole skills infrastructure, isn't it? It's not just the university, it's FE, it's private training providers.
Yeah.
How do you know what you need from a skills perspective, and how do you know where to get it from? I think that's a challenge. Sorry.
No, you are right, that is a challenge, but actually I was just wanting to go back to that slide and the gaps. Until very recently, I was, I guess, a medium-sized employer. I had 140 odd staff. Our biggest issue is actually with young people coming through who don't have the basic skills in numeracy and literacy, and don't know what's expected still through from employers, despite doing lots of work placements, going into schools and FE, trying to talk to young people. Yeah. But I think supported pathways, absolutely. We need to be able to upskill our workforce, and we need to be able to reward them. But I do think still the gap, and I know I'm actually the chair of the Local Enterprise Partnership, so I know about the Careers and Enterprise Company. I know what's out there, but we're still not reaching enough employers to work with young people and to get people used to the different ways of working. It's not about necessarily 9 till 5 or 8 till 4, but we do need to have that better link, as every employer should be, in my opinion, working with their local schools, colleges, to really get that, what happens in work. Yeah. And, that's part. So what we're talking here is post-school.
Yeah.
Yes.
We still have too many young people who are leaving school demotivated and unaware of the incredible opportunities that we have here in the county.
And I guess alongside that, knowing and understanding that they can create those opportunities for themselves, because we know that this, as a county, we've got a really high level of SME micro business. Yeah. So actually, to engage young people into doing that for themselves, as well as getting the skills to work with others.
We need to make business, we need to make the world of work interesting, exciting, because actually, for those of us who are entrepreneurs in the audience, it is incredibly exciting. Yeah. It's also can be really frustrating, but it is exciting, and there are huge opportunities, particularly in this county, where you can do a job and you can be on a Zoom or Teams call with people in New York or London or Pembrokeshire or wherever, but you're creating wealth. The money you're earning is going back into the local economy. But we still have this gap with young people not knowing the opportunities or not realising the opportunities. And I think that's the bit, and I think that's a real role for business to go out there and speak to, even from primary upwards, work is fun.
Yeah. And so how do we facilitate that?
How do we make that happen? Because that was something that the previous group identified as well, that disconnect between employers and people leaving school, and having a framework and network in place, a strategy in place to remedy that. So what is the answer, I guess?
How do you see that happening? I mean, obviously you've got business here.
I mean, just on that front, you know, the whole work experience thing in our office. I work for Cooper Green Pooks. We're a firm of property consultants, and every so often we'll have whether it's a sixth form or a GCSE student, they'll come to us and ask whether they can come for a week's work experience, which is fine, but that probably happens maybe once or twice a year.
Yeah.
I just don't know whether it's up to maybe the colleges and the schools to perhaps go to the local business community and ask, look, are you willing to give up a month a year for our students to come for work experience, rather than leave it to the students to effectively go out and find somewhere to get that work experience. I don't know how many people in this room would offer the opportunity for those students to have that experience.
I think you'd be surprised. I think a lot of employers in Shropshire would, because the experience of being here is a lot of employers in Shropshire are proactive and would back that type of approach. I think you know we'd get a lot of interest in that.
One of the challenges from the previous room, and I think we need to move on to the next question. I don't know if there's a button on the podium to press. Yeah. Thank you. But in relation to opportunities, particularly, in the previous room we were talking about that infrastructure. So there's a will, obviously, because at least 2 individuals in this room alone have described that. But how do we facilitate it? Whose responsibility is it to try to do that? Because the more we push that onto somebody else and don't take that on ourselves, the less likely it is to happen. So how do we create that in this county? How would we do that? Anybody got any sort of thoughts about, is it a different network? Is it utilising an existing network in a different way? What could we do together to facilitate that, if that's a significant challenge? And I think we've recognised that it is.
I mean, is there anything locally, any pressure locally from businesses, from the council, on the colleges and the universities to tailor courses to what are growing sectors in Shropshire, for example? Or do the colleges and the universities just look at the national picture?
I mean, well, I can talk to that from,
I can talk from an employment sector.
You hear lots about agri-tech being important and economic, renewable energies, etc. in Shropshire being a growth area for those sectors. Is that translating to what we're teaching our young children?
I think there's a huge opportunity, and I can only speak from the position I hold at DWP, where green jobs and green industry is a huge opportunity for us in Shropshire. But I think there's a need for, again, a strategic framework to be linked up and for funding to be set aside to create and train people for the jobs of tomorrow, retrain people who have lost work during COVID, who have a transferable skills. But there's an opportunity only if we move quickly. You know, we're talking of a 5-year plan here as a task force from 2022 to 2027, and the opportunity is there now if the key players move and work together, take shared responsibility. That's from the employment end. Kirsty, I'm sure from the skills.
So from our perspective as a university, and it will be slightly different for different universities, but from our perspective, we absolutely want our programmes not just to be about training an individual for a particular role, but also training them and giving them the knowledge and skills to transfer that to different roles should they wish to undertake them. So what we would want to do, and in any new programme that we develop, we have to have external advisement from the industry, whichever industry it happens to be. So programmes like our nursing programmes, for example, are heavily regulated. So there's no real issue with those types of programmes. It's the programmes that I'm involved with. So from a business school's perspective, business management, what does that mean, really? So you've got the functions of management, which we would talk about on a programme, but that's not necessarily going to develop a young person to set up their own business, because they're oriented around theoretical constructs. So how do we enable, then, that student to see what real life's like? Well, we do that through assessment. So, for example, on our business management programme, we have Iceland, who sets students a task, and then students in groups present those challenges, I suppose, back to Iceland for Iceland to implement those that they feel they could or want to. So authentic assessment is one way, but that's after the horse is bolted, in a sense. It's about course development and delivery, not about course the writing of the course, the establishment of the course in the first place. So we've got to look at local regional trends in terms of what contribution we can make, but they change, and it takes us up to 2 years to get from writing a degree to delivering a degree. So we need to rely on you to tell us what you think you need in 2 to 3 to 5 years' time for us to be able to then write a program that provides you with the employees that you need in that. So the whole thing's interconnected. Sorry, there's two questions. I mean, he's got the mic, he's got the power. So you'll have to pass it to you.
Thank you. People in the room will have heard me make a similar point in the last session, but just, I mean, firstly on tapping into the boomerangers, the people who've come back to Shropshire, who've got themselves a degree, who are struggling. You know, is there a piece of work that could be done to actually just put them in the room and say, and bring in employers and bring in the opportunity, you know, to talk about what are the opportunities for graduates who have come back to Shropshire, who maybe decided not to stay in the city where their university was, you know, because there are loads of them. I just know that from personal experience. The second one is just to do with the education sector at the moment. So I'm currently Mayor of Shrewsbury. I was at the HE Awards for Shrewsbury College. I ended up having a chat to some people who are getting their qualifications in construction. About 5 or 6 of them. Only one of them knew the word retrofit.
Yeah.
That was somewhat of a shock for me. And the third thing is just in terms of the network. So I'm hearing about UCS and the college. I'm just wondering where Harper Adams is in this story, because they seem to be so important, and they're doing innovative stuff around modernising a sustainable agriculture. And are they being pulled in? I heard somebody, for example, make a very interesting suggestion that when we think about what happens to Shire Hall, that perhaps Harper Adams would like to have a town centre site, you know, because being stuck out there is perhaps, don't wish to be rude to that part of Shropshire, but is perhaps not the best experience for young students, and maybe they want to have a town centre site, and would that make sense?
In terms of the graduate one, you know, there's been various funded courses over the past 3 years to support graduates as specific cohorts in terms of helping them into employment. You know, I think this year the Kickstart scheme has supported graduates move into employment. It's offered opportunities to people within industries and sectors that just wouldn't have been available to them before. So a huge amount of money has gone into that locally. I can see, again, people in the room who've supported us in creating jobs in that, and we've had a huge amount of success with it locally in Shropshire. But I think graduates and graduate support will be something that will be looked at, and again, funding will be put aside to support in graduates, like I said, in groups of cohorts and with route ways forwards.
Yeah, and I think it's also useful in relation to respond to the point that you've made. In our previous group, we also talked about the missing group, if you like, that 24 to 55, and to not forget that group, because it's that group that you're partly referring to, but it's that group that may need reskill, upskill, retrofit, to sort of coin a phrase there, into the roles that are available in the county. So from a skills perspective, a skills provider's perspective, how do we enable that to happen? Because they're the individuals that, from an economic perspective, we want to stay in the county, because they're actually contributing in a different way to the students would. But they plan to stay because they've chosen to bring their families. So the very much were sort of termed as forgotten in the previous group, but we shouldn't forget, in terms of skills at least, that particular group of people. Sorry.
Forgive me jumping in here, sorry, just before you go, but there's a relevant question here that's just come from the streaming audience, which I think follows on perfectly from the debate here. Sorry to jump in, from Paul, who says, with regard to your question too, are we not talking about Shropshire just having an image problem, and that it's not what is available in the county, it's what people think is not available in the county, because it has a reputation for having an older than average population, and for years and years you've heard parents and grandparents who've said they've had to leave Shropshire to go and pursue their dreams.
And the reason we're laughing, go on, Ben.
For Paul, who's put that question in, that's been posed to us in the other room. And for people who've lived and worked in Shropshire, it's something that you will probably recognise as a key challenge that we always face, that possibly it's a lovely place to come and stay. But outside of that, there's lots of different questions to be answered.
Yeah, and as parents in the previous room, of parents of individuals at university, I think they see from through their children's eyes how attractive the county might be as a student. So they were sort of talking about how, as students, and this may be too much detail, but they used to go out every night. and they don't get the same sense of that in parts of Shropshire. And maybe that's where we started to then talk about the ecosystem. What is it that we're trying to achieve as a county, the types of individuals at what stage in their life, all of that. But yeah, it's what is attractive, and I think there was it's sort of the place, the brand of the place, I think was where we sort of got to in the previous room. Sorry, you've now got the mic.
And it's not a really significant point, unfortunately, but I was just interested, you were saying 2-year leading to tell you precisely, what the requirements are. I work for Shropshire Council, I look after a digital programme, predominantly around the rollout of digital technology, so whether that's mobile technology or whether that's fixed wire technology or whether that's full fibre technology. And I think it's really tricky in the world that we're in at the moment to think 2 years ahead. I mean, particularly around 5G, there's a whole evolution that's happening with skills particularly. Is what are those skills that will be required in 2 years' time? I think Mark Barrow touched upon it earlier this morning. It's going to be a completely different skill set that's required. So I think there's a need for the sector to obviously be agile. There's got to be a generic base, but there's then got to be something that you're working on with the businesses, with the sectors, to be able to then adapt accordingly to meet those particular requirements. So, I've had a number of conversations with some of those providers who are building infrastructure who can't get the skills. If they want to get people to splice fibre and go out there and do some of that digital work, they have to send them over to Suffolk at the moment. So there's one place in the country at the moment. There's probably another one that's going to be set up, but there's real opportunity here if you work with the right sectors to develop some of those skills. And I think there's probably a little bit more work that we have to do collectively in guiding you, but also bringing some of that industry to you to tell you precisely, but thinking about that agile approach, because it's really difficult.
And absolutely. And from a skills provider's perspective, we provide skills, but also education around that. So the degree isn't just about providing skills for a particular type of role. It's more rounded than that, and that's why it takes so long to get together. Whereas if we thought about an integrated skills provider ecosystem, you could have those dynamic, responsive, very much skills-oriented providers alongside those higher level skills, degree and masters and even PhD, which would be more university territory, that mutually support, that are mutually supportive. Universities aren't agile organisations, they just aren't built for that. But we absolutely recognise that there's a regional contribution we should be making to the economy. So how do we make that work, which is your point? How in such a responsive environment, how do we make sure that we are able to respond? Similar problem in terms of green skills.
Yes.
So I'm involved in the HiNet project. I don't know if any of you have heard about HiNet, but the Northwest is one of the first cluster sequencing in the cluster sequencing application. And that's the skills deficit, the skills crisis there is not insignificant. But those organisations in that consortium need those skills now, not in 5 years' time. They need them right now. But again, they're not even in a position yet to articulate what they think those skills are going to be. So at the moment, we've looked at a gas engineer becoming a hydrogen engineer. Well, what does that mean? What is the difference in those skills that will be required between a gas engineer and a hydrogen engineer? Just as an example. But it requires all parts of that ecosystem, even though we don't recognise ourselves as an ecosystem yet, to be flexible, to be agile, to be able to respond. And that's problematic because we don't know what we're really responding to yet.
So just touching on that point, just a really quick one really. Those organisations are desperate for those skills.
Yeah.
So isn't the conversation with them to be doing collaborative courses together? So they come in, they start the work process, and then move along to it, and potentially that's what we should be looking at across the board in Shropshire.
Absolutely.
It's moving across to that, because that's what we need. We need talent that's coming through and actually getting on the job experience. I've recruited thousands of people. I used to work in university backgrounds and student unions, and we used to do a lot of development and training with our staff to make sure that when they were going out and finishing their degrees and getting the work done, that we were showing them how to get through those assessment centre processes, showing them how to do that things
Yeah.
and getting them involved so they could do it. And that was just something we did as part of the business. So working with them together gets them more engaged and allows them to be involved in what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I think it needs to be, certainly in rural areas, it has to be this collaboration of two sets of skills working collaboratively.
Absolutely, the action needs to take place on a local level, and there needs to be engagement locally in terms of you're working with your local businesses to be able to identify your opportunities. The challenge then is accessing the funding and getting that commitment. You know, like the gent has just said there, for that particular industry, there's one training sector in the whole of Britain where you have to go to Suffolk. We're facing that with some of our green industry, and we're facing challenges in being able to get towards that funding, to be able to fund that training, to be able to have those people ready for those jobs of tomorrow. And I think, again, as a collaborative piece of work, that is there for us all to be part of.
Yeah, and does take a very mature approach from what, you know, is very much a commercial environment. So, you know, to act collaboratively but remain commercial and profitable, it is not easy, is it? It's not easy.
No.
So we're going to need to move on to the next question.
I'm conscious, guys, of the time, so...
Yeah, but happy to hear your response to that.
So, last one. What one thing then would make a significant difference in improving skills and employment in Shropshire? You know, what are our thoughts as a group? Lots of conversations of things we can do, things we'd like to put in place, things we'd like to change, but what is the one main thing we could do?
So do we think cost is the issue? Do we think there's a need for investment in skills? Because you know particularly there's been a significant investment in skills. So is it in the right place? Is it at the right time? Is it at the right level? What is it that we can do to target that investment maybe?
So we were touching on this earlier before we started, and I think the big thing that a lot of people are finding is time.
Yeah.
So obviously the resources there, there's some massive companies here that have huge amounts of resources and it's not getting delivered in-house for them. You know, basic level, you know, major companies like Tesco's, Asda's, those kind of things aren't ticking all their training boxes, aren't doing things because they physically haven't got the capacity.
So we'll be paying a levy. So it may be that we're able to facilitate the level that they don't pay to come down their supply chain.
But then there's other things with that where it's about making those technologies smart. So I know a lot of companies have moved on to making them digital. So for your entry-level training and those kind of things, so they can be done off book, you know, so you're not actually having to worry about it on the day in the work. It can be done after the fact. Someone can get those things in to make sure that all these boxes are ticked. And that should also be funded and paid for, because the other thing that tends to happen quite a lot with certain companies is they don't pay people for training, which is illegal. But, you know, so they should be doing those things and they should be engaged with it. And why would you want to go and work for a company that's not going to do that? So I think the real key elements there is it's time as much as it is money. And people having enough time to invest that into the people and making sure that they can deliver it. And that's what engages people to want to stay and remain and work in the environment.
Yeah, and maybe coming back to your point, it's about understanding, those individuals understanding what it's like, particularly young people, because you could give young people skills, but it's those interpersonal skills particularly that need to be applied. And I don't think the pandemic's helped that.
No.
You know, just basic communication skills.
They've lost a year of formative education.
Will be challenging, I think, for young people having the confidence to be able to do what you've described. I think it'll be really tough. It will be really tough. We've got 2 minutes, so please, come on. What are our significant difference? What are we going to make? What are we going to do?
At the risk of sounding boring, just going back to what I said before, which is that actually as businesses, we should be reaching out to our training providers, reaching out to FE, reaching out to work-based training providers and saying what we want. I think for too long businesses have been passive and expecting training providers to come to them. The only way that we will be able to create our employees of the future is by engaging with HE, FE, work-based learning to say what we need. And then the other issue is time, because for a lot of industries at the moment, they don't have enough staff, therefore they feel they can't release staff for training. So there is a unvirtuous circle at the moment, which we need to break. But I do think all of us in business have a responsibility to our own businesses and to our communities to reach out and to say to training providers, this is what we need.
I think it's a really good point, Mandy, because I think probably for many of our organisations' business, we've been very insular for many, many years. And actually what the pandemic has shown us is when we come together as groups, as task force, whatever it is, as a collaborative team, we can make change and plan change and put it in place. I think that's a really important point to take forward.
Yeah. So it looks like we've got a...
I've got, you know how when
yeah,
I work
yeah,
out,
you
I've
look.
got something to say,
yeah.
don't you? So, yeah, we've got one from Mark here who just says exactly this. He said, what needs to happen is that businesses need to realise that colleges, universities and further education organisations don't automatically know what they need.
No,
they need to feel that the door is open and that colleges want to engage with businesses and that they're the ones that need to be proactive, is what Mark says.
Yeah,
so.
which is, you know, a complementary point to yours. And absolutely, if we're all passive, nothing changes. Whereas if we're all active, at least we're involved in a conversation, aren't we? Even if we don't all agree about what should happen, which we probably wouldn't, but at least we're discussing it, at least something would happen as a result of that conversation. Just need the mic so people online can hear, that's all.
I suppose to that particular point is how do you make it easier for businesses to engage and have those conversations? Because I think that's the trick here, is how do you make yourselves more accessible and how quickly, going back to that agile point, can you actually engage and put a scheme together for businesses who may be growing very, very quickly and need that support to get the workforce trained and in place?
Yeah, and it's a difficult question because as a university, the major part of our funding, and it will be different for different universities, but our typical type of university, which is teaching focused, our income is from our student fees. So we have to make sure that those fees are utilised in such a way that our students get the most benefit from it. So it's how do we find the time and prioritise that work in order that we can then feed that back, that virtuous cycle that we've sort of spoken about. How do we find the time to enable that to happen? Because it's in our best interest to make it happen. But everybody needs to be proactive in that supply chain, don't they? And that I suppose is the challenge. How do we instigate a proactive, integrated supply chain of employment and skills?
Yeah, I would
because
just
that's not
echo
what
that.
we've not got that at the moment.
We don't, and as somebody who engages directly with employers most days, like Kirsty says, we have to make that a priority of ours. We have to find the time to do it, because if we don't take action today, we will end up with thousands and thousands of people with the wrong skills for the jobs that we have locally. So it has to be a priority of ours. We have to link our employers to our training providers, to our emerging sectors, to be able to feed our people in who have unfortunately lost their jobs, to retrain and reskill for those jobs that we're going to create for tomorrow.
Thank you. We're on to the coffee break. We will be around over coffee if you'd like to share any further thoughts, but please provide your feedback on the sheet provided. I think it's red we decided?
I think is it the blue one?
The blue,
Yeah.
sorry. The blue sheet, if you're colourblind. So the blue sheet. So if there's anything that you feel like you wanted to say but didn't say, please make sure you pop it on that sheet for us so we can take that back and discuss later. So thank you for your time.
So let's introduce the people who are going to deliver our third and final workshop. That's all about strategic locations from Shropshire Council. Hayley Owen and Tim Pritchard, the stage is yours.
Thanks all. So you've had two sessions already, and the final one we're talking about today is around strategic locations. So you've all had kind of key values and things that have come out of the task force, which underpin all of the streams we're looking at today. So the key findings that have come out around our strategic locations, and we just want to test these with you, check with you, see if they're right, there's any gaps in that you think we need to pick up or give more focus to. So as you can see, it's around creating vibrant towns and the role that our towns play and continue to play, and how that's developed and evolved through the pandemic, through the last 5 years, and what that might look like going forward. And having that healthy towns that Tracy talked about earlier on, you know, how do we balance that and get that right across our network of really important towns? That investment in infrastructure, and by that we mean, you know, there's the transport, there's the digital, there's the green, the blue infrastructure. You know, how does that impact and bring forward our strategic locations? Improving connectivity, so very much more about the sort of the movement of people, the movement of business, and how do we get that right, and the challenges probably and the opportunities that will come forward for that for Shropshire. Enhancing that visitor economy and the culture role, and how that sits with our economic growth, and how that sits with our communities and our people that we're trying to attract and stay in Shropshire. and that sort of sustainably connected communities, and looking around housing within that as well, around that affordable housing, around that key worker accommodation, around some of the challenges around private rented sector as well, and how that impacts on our workforce. So those are the key things that have come out through the Economic Task Force, which we've been fed in from the business communities across the county and with our partners. So I'm just going to open that up really at the moment. So for Tim and I, if there's people if you've got questions online, if you've got questions in the room, you've got things you think not quite sure if that's right, if there's things we could add to, just open that up for some discussion really. If anyone's got any thoughts on that. I mean, there's something there, isn't there, around, how do our market towns, so vital, so important, and that hinterland that go with them. So before we talked, there's been talk about place plans, which sit across the county, as Tracy said, 18 of those, and how that works with the hinterlands around them, and how those towns have become that real hub to bring people together, and people looking at those for more and more amenities these days, and actually how does that work in terms of driving our economic growth. So, is there anything there that we haven't quite picked up in this? Does that make sense? Do you recognise that? Tracy.
Thank you.
Andrew will come with the mic. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Tracy Dark from Shropshire Council. One of the things that we've talked about in the other groups is really that sort of link of businesses to businesses, the sort of support for businesses, and some businesses feeling a little bit in isolation. So they've probably sort of created the business through COVID pandemic, not sure where to go, how to connect with other businesses. Found things like today, for example, really useful, seeing people. So I think that's a bit of a gap. So I just wondered whether other people in the room that have businesses, whether they feel that as well.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, it's a really interesting point that has been raised around the networking. So this is a lot about physical. When you talk about strategic locations, we automatically go to that physical location, but actually the power through the pandemic has been that we haven't had to have those physical locations. We've built our networks in other ways, and actually, how do we continue to do that through a digital forum? And seamlessly, I'm going to bring in Chris Taylor from Shropshire Council. Thanks, Chris.
I just wanted to touch upon the fact that we spoke about that in quite a lot of detail earlier on, so you'd probably want to maybe extend the conversation into potentially other areas, simply that we've obviously already highlighted that as a key theme about having those digital hubs and virtual hubs, which I think businesses certainly recognise as being an important aspect.
Thanks, Chris. Another question. Thank you.
Hello, and just to carry on that point, I think it's really important, you're right to say, where businesses have felt in isolation, obviously just because of geography of Shropshire anyway, it's a huge area.
Yeah.
But also I just think, globally we've all gone through that, and you mentioned that how nice it is to be in a room with people and have, I've chatted to 4 or 5 people today who I wouldn't have emailed or whatever, but I've had really good meaningful conversations which are not necessarily business networking, but it's widening my knowledge of how businesses work around here. So I think it's important when we talk about digital, my business is very digital, that the importance of sense of place. And I really believe that to carry on these conversations, because our world is so transient at the moment, you can't beat actually just having conversations like this, having those ability to maybe have a coffee or just to be able to collide and knowledge exchange is really, really important. And I know that the council is doing some work with developing the co-working hubs, so you could actually start to have what's being called the hub and spoke. So effectively, Shrewsbury being the capital of Shropshire, being the hub, but you've got Oswestry, Whitchurch, all places which you can connect up. And I think that's just vitally important for anybody who's running a business and just start-up businesses, or just to be able to find out who's around, just to have those conversations. So, digital is cool, but digital doesn't work without the colliding and real interaction with really real people. Just to, I guess another point on that in terms of, because obviously we're also talking about having these senses of place and them being sustainable, of just the improvement of being able to use societal networks, just being able to walk. Inherently, I think it's a terrible capital for that, just because of the space. But yeah, Shrewsbury, I think, could really benefit from really changing how people move around that space, because it's not designed for that. It's very much a car-centric place, and I think that would really, really help with sort of generating the town centres.
Brilliant, thank you. I think Mandy's got something to bring in, and while we're just going to Mandy, I was just going to talk a little bit around about kind of growth corridors as well, the key corridors of growth. We've got the market towns, but that's sort of the M54, the A483, A5, and the A41, A49, you know, we all know those. And you know, that's kind of been an area of some of our key sort of energy around some of the business investment, and where we're looking to channel some of our strategic, more hard infrastructure investment into. So that's just something to think about through this as well. Thank you, Mandy.
And I guess my point carries on a little bit from that, but improving connectivity, our physical connectivity is still incredibly poor, and it is very, very Shrewsbury centric. And actually, you know, we are very reliant on people being able to drive. Yeah. We need to get people to we need to be able to move people around without being in cars. Improving our train services, whether that's local or long distance, you know, to London or Manchester or Cardiff. But just getting somebody to work from Bishop's Castle to Shrewsbury, if you don't drive, it's incredibly difficult. If you live 3 miles outside of Clun, how do you get to work if you don't drive? So this is great, but I think just really thinking about what we can do, and I'm very aware of the cost implications of this, but how can we move people around? Because there are, whilst we can work digitally, there is always going to be the need, and as human beings, we do need that collaborative space. And there's a lot of jobs that need people in a place, but we also need a time frame, because I think a lot of this is great, but when can businesses look to seeing that some of their issues around access to workforce can start to be solved?
Brilliant, thank you, Andy. I think Steve was going to come in on that. I don't know, Tim, if there's anything you wanted to sort of talk about with the Shrewsbury movement.
Well, I think Shrewsbury is just a good example of the challenges we face across the county, isn't it, really? I mean, I think it is about connectivity, how do we, and about choice, you know, and I think that's what we're interested in, is what does that choice look like? And I think, you know, we're starting to get into that sort of connectivity and accessibility and movement piece. And it is about choice, and we accept that, you know, a lot of the towns at the moment and the villages are heavily dependent on the private motor vehicle, and how can we build some choice into that? And I think how important is that in terms of joining up business activity as well as community activity? So I think, you know, from that sort of wider rural network, and I know our colleagues have recently put a handsome bid into government to try and address some of that, so I think we're on it, but I suppose we need to take everybody else with us and make sure that we're maximising value out of that. And I think, you know, for me in particular, Shrewsbury, you know, clearly we always say that, you know, one of its greatest constraints is one of its greatest opportunities. Yes, it is currently a car-borne town, but actually it was never designed for that. And actually, is there a way of rebalancing that, and then that thrives through the business community as well? And we're hearing a lot around, you know, how there's particularly the small independents are benefiting from that. So how can we sustain that? And when we talk about sustainability, yes, we talk about the green credentials and climate change, but actually there's something about sustaining business in the widest sense. And I think those are some of the things that we're just trying to understand what the mood feel is for some of this through obviously the strategic locations, and where do we put our energy. And it's not exclusive to the big six, it's to the wider network and how they sit, and how do we join those strategic locations up, which is really coming through strongly today.
Steve, you were going to come in.
Thank you. Steve Brown, Shropshire Council. So just to pick up on some of the issues that have been raised, and to highlight some of the work that we've got in train at the moment. So on public transport, we submitted a £97 million expression of interest to the Department for Transport on Friday. I won't talk about it for long, but I could talk for hours on this. So this is about sort of connectivity, it is about moving people about, it is about improving bus transport, moving people to recreational, night-time economy working, you know, those social interactions. So we will see, you know, and we've put a strong case to government for that, and we will work that through, as well as electric buses and cheaper fares and multi-operator ticketing. So all of that work has gone through, and we've done a lot of work in understanding what those issues are. As regards sort of walking and cycling, we're actually in process now with a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan that is underway. We're working with a company called City Science on that. We're preparing that. We'll be out to public consultation, and that will prepare a plan that will allow us to invest and draw down funding and apply to central government for that work to be done as well. And then finally, we're also in train with our local transport plan, which will look at all of those connectivity issues, so buses, trains, use of cars, walking and cycling, and that will be going out for public consultation subject to approvals around the February-March period. So you'll see a lot of work on that to pull all of these issues together and bring all of those changing circumstances post-COVID that we're aware of.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Can I butt in here with one that I've just got from one of our...
Yeah, of course, and I'll come back to Mandy. Yeah.
Because this fits in with the geography question really was talking about. It's a specific question from Jim Prescott, All Sports Coaches Coaching Academy. He says, we're a new community interest company looking to train military veterans to become coaches who can deliver sport and mentoring programs to children. We're based in Telford, but over the last 18 months we've now offered all our services online rather than face-to-face. The question is if as a result we are now able to offer training across all over the UK, including a lot in Shropshire. Is there a danger that we could now miss out on help in Shropshire or other areas where we operate because we're based in Telford?
Yeah, good question. And I think it's something I was going to flag actually before around, as a business, you know, boundaries and county boundaries, they don't mean anything in terms of most of the time in terms of how you operate. You know, it's about doing your business and where you're located and you know, getting that across your area, reaching your business network. So there is an element sometimes when we talk about like strategic infrastructure and linking those things up that we don't stop at those boundaries. And a lot of the work we've done with the LEP and with partners is around, you know, those cross-boundary working and working through. I think that's a very sort of specific question about a business sort of support element, I think, which we can have a little look at and pick that up with Jim probably separately. You know, about where his location is and I guess what you're trying to do in terms of the business growth that goes with that really. So thank you for that. Mandy, you were going to come back in and then Tracy, sorry.
Just going back to obviously great news that a submission's gone in. I understand there's public consultations happening, but businesses don't tend to respond en masse to public consultations. And if you've got proposals going in that businesses are aware of and can support those submissions, one would hope, particularly around connectivity issues and getting people to and from work or the nighttime economy, that should have more weight with government when they're looking at bids. Yeah. And it's just a question, do you go out before you put proposals in? The proposal that was submitted on Friday, did that have business endorsement across the board to say how important it is to our economy?
Great, thank you, Mandy. I'll bring Tracy in next and then pass back to Steve just to, do you want to respond to that first? But,
mine's just a really quick response actually to Jim Preston. Like, come to Shropshire, you know, base his business here in Shropshire. That's a really good thing. Yes, of course, we don't recognise boundaries, but, you know, we want all businesses here in Shropshire to help Shropshire thrive.
Thanks, Tracy.
Just to pick up on the point on the future consultations, obviously we'll make sure that links into the businesses and all of those connections. The bus improvement bid, the approval of all the Shropshire MPs, and also we consulted with the business improvement districts as well because of the time scale and the constraints that we had with that of the government funding. So there is more that we could do, but we are acutely aware of that.
Thanks, Steve. So just moving us on, if that's okay. I mean, lots of really interesting things that have come out which feed into this question, really, which is what are the key opportunities and challenges specific to Shropshire around strategic infrastructure? So lots of kind of themes that have come out already. Is there anything that, you know, is really standing out for you as being, you know, opportunities and challenges hand in hand, aren't they, in terms of how we look at those? That you think, you know, we've talked about digital. You've obviously had a good debate about that in other conversations and how that's so important in terms of, you know, how businesses are operating going forward. Is there anything that you think we need to be picking up for and making more emphasis through this economic strategy review piece? Alessio, I think you were coming in. Thank you.
Sorry, this is just going back to the connectivity and the digital side of things, but I don't know whether there's a scenario where businesses are making decisions on where to be placed within the county based purely on the quality of the broadband in a particular location. Because we find that when we're letting agents, we have businesses coming looking for offices, and they'll say, well, we've been to look at a property on a particular street, but we've found out the broadband's not great there. 300 yards down the road, the broadband's fantastic. They never seem to understand why. This is just anecdotal, so I don't, this is not necessarily based on fact. I had another company come to me just recently to say, for example, they've got some offices on Pride Hill. They believe they're in some kind of twilight zone where for some reason in their office they can't get broadband very well. 50 yards up the road, it's fine. So I don't know whether people are impacting their business decisions on that issue.
And does that start to impact on perception as well? So that's the reality, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then does that start to get out there and people say, well, Shrewsbury's great, but And
if people don't want to come and work in the town centre, then obviously the town centre economy will suffer ultimately. And we don't want everybody working out of town. We want a nice balance of the two, really.
And I think that's...
Just another really quick anecdotal thing, it definitely does do that, perception-wise. I mean, there's the classic Marlow black spot. You know, you should drive past it, everything just goes off immediately. So why would you put your business there? And that's why there's no businesses on Marlow.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point around that whole location and investment and what's driving investment. And I think, Leslie, your point around, what makes a business decision for people, and has that changed through the pandemic? Are people reassessing how and why they're locating in certain areas? Is there any change in the sort of market drivers? I think that's something we're quite keen to understand a bit more about. And has that been a benefit to Shropshire, actually, in terms of locations across the county that are now more attractive and there's more opportunity? Chris, I think you wanted to come back in on some of the digital.
I mean, obviously, digital does fall under my responsibility, I suppose, and has done for a number of years now. And it's good that it's not just me that has that black spot around Mardle, actually, when I'm going to the bank. I mean, I think we have to reflect on how far we've come. If you think in 2014 we had really bad broadband in Shropshire, and we've gone from about 24% to 98%. So, we're in a very strong place, but there's still lots to do. I think positively for Shrewsbury, there are plans in place, commercial plans. So we're expecting Openreach to deploy in Shropshire in a number of places that will include Shrewsbury. We've got competition building in Shrewsbury Town Centre as well with another provider that's moving in. So, those things will change. I think you're absolutely right about perception. I think sometimes it's a very confused marketplace with regards to terminology and getting access to information. And I'd always, advise any businesses who need information on the landscape to certainly contact us at Connecting Shropshire. We can advise you accordingly on that, whether that's fixed wireless broadband or wireless broadband, so we can offer some help on that. The other thing I just wanted to say is, whilst we've got contracts in place that are still delivering superfast broadband, there is a big programme that will come out. Probably over the next 2 years, we'll see some development in the gigabit programme. Shropshire is part of a very early phase. Significant investment will be coming in as part of that, which will basically mean that we'll actually be building over some of the superfast areas that we've already built. But the priority has to be equity with regards to ensuring that everybody has the same level of broadband. What we don't want to see in Shropshire is that we start to build gigabit connectivity in areas that already have good broadband speeds and leave some of those, in the more rural areas behind. So, certainly from the council's point of view, our aspiration is to go to those rural areas as a starting point, at the same time as obviously trying to lift up those other areas.
Thanks, Chris. I just wanted to put a little question out there before we move on to the next bit, which was around, we haven't talked much about the sort of the housing kind of piece that goes alongside the employment, and in terms of that being, is that a challenge? I'm sort of asking a question I'm probably nodding my answer to, and I can see Mandy agreeing, is that a challenge to that retaining our staff, to grow in our economy, and how do we what's the opportunity that we need to be looking at through that kind of, that piece really? I mean, there's a lot through the local plan that we're looking at clearly, but that is a big challenge when it comes to retaining staff in some of our kind of key sectors as well, particularly chatting before around in adult social care. clearly that's an issue. Tracy?
Thank you, Hayley. Yeah, and it's something I spoke about earlier on the sort of health piece, really. But you know, thinking about our biggest businesses in Shropshire, you know, so the council, you know, NHS, and how do we help people who are in perhaps some of the lower paid jobs to be able to live in the area as well? So, you know, I think the whole key worker homes is quite important, and you know, we've got policies in our local plan to help that through, but you know, we need to be doing more really so that people can afford to live in the area and work in the area as well. So I think you're right, it's quite a significant part in terms of our economic prosperity, because if people can't afford to live here, they can't come here and necessarily work here either, can they? Because you know, it's not feasible. So I think you know, there's a big bit of work around that we need to work with our partners on.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Mandy, do you want to come in on that, please? Sorry to Mandy. I'll just move us to the final question to get you thinking before. Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you. Two things. Absolutely agree about the property. I actually wanted to, first of all, say that one of our real opportunities, but it's also a threat, is that we have a border with another country, Wales, and we need to be looking both west as well as east. But also there is the threat that we have a lot of people that just go straight through our county and don't stop. So we need to be working on that. But I do think there's huge opportunity for us as a county and as a business community to look to our partners to the west, and then how those major routes through for exporting, you know, to the Welsh ports, whatever. So we tend to look east and think that all the answers are from Birmingham. Actually, I think we've got more opportunity than that, and that's also north and south. But let's not make us, and actually I think I heard Leslie say it, but let's not make us a commuter town.
No.
We want to be having the properties here for all people, particularly lower paid people. We do need to do something about the rental market. At the moment, if you're a young person, and actually, Darren, you mentioned this earlier, but if you're a young person trying to find a one-bed flat, you are literally you're in a bidding market at the moment. And we've got to do something about that urgently.
Yeah, no, really good points. Thank you, Mandy. Which I think probably, I mean, they all sort of link, hopefully, in the questions in terms of, you know, the one thing that will make that significant difference in helping us to deliver our strategic locations and what that's all about in terms of employment and housing coming hand in hand in that. So is there something that's, you know, just there in your mind, you know, if we could really start to focus our energy on this issue or on a couple of specific things that we really should be, you know, this is all about our lobbying as well for funding, through all the mechanisms that are available to us. You know, we need to be pushing on a couple of really key points for Shropshire to get those messages. They should just be things we can all repeat back and be pushing and collectively aiming for. So I guess it's another question to you, you know, lots of really good stuff, digital, transport, housing. You know, is there anything within that we need to be thinking about a bit differently? Alessio, thank you.
Not necessarily relative to that, but I mean, we all recognise there's this massive short-term problem with employment at the moment, and I just wonder whether there's any short-term plan that could be put in place in regards to transport. It'd be interesting to know how many of these people that are unemployed because they haven't got access to transport to get them to the jobs. Should we be looking at those figures and saying, right, we need a bus from Oswestry to Shrewsbury, you know, extra buses or whatever it might be, I don't know, more to help, you know, hospitality with nighttime employment. Is there anything being done here and now, really, rather than a long-term plan? I just wonder whether it's something we need to look at.
I think that's a really valid point, isn't it? And I think talking in some other forums as well recently, it's been about, you know, schemes where, you know, there's sort of almost that it's that first month into employment that's the real struggle for people when they've been unemployed. They haven't got the funding to get them into the job, you know, to actually get from A to B, to actually access the job. They've got the job, that's great. How do we actually help pump prime that? And I think that's a really, really important thing to think about when we're talking about future funding opportunities and what we should be asking for and how we structure our asks, because that's sort of traditional schemes, you know, we've done in the past, you know, sort of moped and those sorts of schemes where people can hire, you know, they're giving them for a month and they pay them back. Those sorts of schemes actually, you know, from our rural areas are so important. And the conversation having before, you know, somebody in Bishop's Castle can't get to a job, they've got a job, they've done that really hard bit of getting the job, but now they can't get to the job, and the first month they can't afford the bus fare. You know, how do we intervene in that market, and what does that look like? So I think that's really important, you know, when we're talking about actually connecting that all together. So yeah, I think that's something we need to pick up in this, but it comes across the whole piece, doesn't it? Employment and skills and the locations, but no good having the locations if we can't get the people there. So that's a really helpful point. Anybody else got anything that's come? Carl,
I've got in with one here that I've got on the streaming services from Peter, which follows on perfectly from what you were saying there. He said, the Chancellor last week mentioned many towns and cities regarding to his levelling up agenda. Shropshire was missing from the list. Is this because we don't shout loud enough, or we don't shout in a joined up enough way to make our case? And are we being joined up enough?
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. I might look towards the floor for some. I've got a response, but I think Councillor Picton can come in on that one. Thank you, Leslie.
Picton, leader of Shropshire Council. Basically, Shropshire is in Tier 2, not Tier 1. Pretty much every single council that was mentioned last week is in Tier 1. I couldn't possibly comment about the political makeup of those areas either. You wouldn't expect me to. So I don't think we shout loud enough. I think we've heard a number of times today about we do hide our light under a bushel. There's lots of really good stuff going on in Shropshire and we don't make enough of it. I was delighted last year that we managed to actually bring back tourism into the council. It's great that Andrea's here today. Already we've made a significant difference in the tourism offer just by having those resources, and that's very much what today's about. I just want to say one other thing that's been sort of in my head for the last sort of quarter of an hour. I was part of a think tank a couple of weeks ago about employment issues within rural counties. It wasn't just here, it was Cumbria and other places. And the one thing that we are suffering from, and it's a direct result of the pandemic, is that people aren't undertaking second jobs. So whereas we have people with full-time jobs also working jobs in bars in the evening, now the think tank think that will change as the year goes on, because people have, at the moment they're saying they've got enough to get by with and that's fine, but as things go on they will want to do that again. I'm not sure in Shropshire that actually will happen. So when we go back to things like housing and stuff, our sectors that are inherently poorly paid, and I include the NHS and care in that, it's that jobs, those people that we desperately need to find good quality homes for. So for me, that's, if there was one thing that I could change, it would actually be to provide significant key worker housing very, very quickly, but good quality key worker housing. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Anybody else got anything they want to sort of put into that? Visitor economy was mentioned, and culture, and I think that was, you know, Shropshire is a great place to, it's a lovely place to live. If you can afford to live here and you've got a home and it's beautiful, and that's great. So we need to, you know, it's almost how do we use that and to attract people, but to get people to stay and locate their businesses. And I think that's something that, you know, with that joining up, and I think we have got a piece now where we, you know, working more collectively, but with the industry as well. You know, this isn't just Shropshire Council how we're doing this. This is why we're all in the room. So I think that's something that, you know, in terms of those locations and those offers, I think is something we perhaps need to perhaps spend some more energy on and focus on. Chris.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether there was a...
Hold on, just wait for the mic. Sorry, Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Hill from Shropshire Council. Just wondering about the whole role of the sectors and whether we should be doing more to encourage the sectors. I mean, historically, Shropshire Council's been quite active. We've got the Food Enterprise Centre, but it's whether there is that sort of soft synergy of related activities that all come together that actually make people, A, want to live here, or businesses that would want to grow. And we've already had hints of that with people saying, you know, we need opportunities to meet, we need advice. There are elements of that. We've got the growth hub, but it's, you know, do we need an advanced manufacturing sector? Do we need a sort of centre? Do we need some sort of digital health focus place? It's just, do we need to sort of grow those sectors? There's the digital aspect, but is there any physical implications as well, and where would they go?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So it's that clustering point, isn't it? Around clustering, around incubator spaces with the skills element, and you know our traditional sectors that we're working on and developing. And actually, is that still relevant? I suppose is a question. Is that still important to strategic locations? Our understanding is yes, and we should be trying to channel that energy. But you know, that's what we're. You know, those are the sort of questions post-pandemic that we are asking ourselves now. So I think there are lots of food for thought on that. I'm just going to bring Tracy in perhaps for the final comment.
Just in terms of developing those sectors, as Chris has said, I suppose it's how we can do that together, because I think it comes back to the point of it's not the council doing all of this and unfortunately can't. You know, we've got financial pressures, as everybody has. So, you know, whilst we would like to be developing innovation hubs all over the place, given half the chance, we need to be looking at doing that in partnership with businesses. So I suppose it's, you know, how people here today can, you know, speak to the council and look at opportunities really that we can do something in collaboration really to bring these opportunities forward for our communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Excellent. Okay. Anyone final comment? Sorry, thank you, Julian.
Thank you, Julian Dean, Councillor. Just want to repeat a point I made in the very first session, which is also to consider the demand side and helping that to bring back to the story on Saturday of the green homes, open green homes, where a few homes opened up to show what they were doing in terms of retrofitting. More than 50 people went into the first home. There are people out there looking to invest in renewable energy for their homes, or looking to invest just cash that they've got, because, you know, it was interesting. Ed Potter's first slide showed us that there was significant private investment available, but those people need help to invest in the right way and to find the firms that can do those jobs. So I think there's a job of work to do about the demand side as well.
Yeah, no, really, really valid points. Thank you. Okay, I think we're actually up to time, so it's been a really interesting discussion and debate. If there's anything, clearly, you know the drill. You've got forms, please fill them in. Anything you want to add, and we really welcome any further feedback on that as an opportunity. So,
thanks, both. Thank you very much. We're now going to, I think, have a couple of minutes break while we welcome back everybody else from the other rooms, and then we'll get together and start dissecting what everybody's been saying. So thanks very much. Is Mark Barrow, who was following the supporting local businesses debate. So, Mark, over to you.
Great, thank you, Carl. Quickly then, question one, did we recognise the findings of the gaps, additional aspects that we need to include? There's a general surprise, I think, at the extent of the recruitment shortages that people are facing. So it's not necessarily that skills is an issue we always talk about, but man, has the gap opened up in a lot of areas. So that additional focus was a theme that kind of ran throughout actually many things. There was a point about connectivity, and particularly it was around nighttime economy, but also rural communities and how people can access things. There was the whole thing about matching the supplier skills with the needs of the local economy. Again, that's been a longer term thing, but that kind of future economy and what do we need. And then there was a particular one there, you know, that we hadn't pulled out already, which is how can we help businesses, reduce their carbon footprint? What advice and support is there? Because how do you count carbon emissions, for example, is a difficult one. So I think that was really quite interesting. In terms of opportunities and challenges specific, there was a bit of a theme about spaces and co-working spaces kind of emerged. And one of the things I recall in that context was in Q1 and 2 last year, Estates Gazette's the go-to property journal. You know, apparently Shrewsbury had the biggest increase in demand for commercial space in the UK, according to that survey. So, you know, that kind of stuff, I think we've got some evidence behind as well. The simplification of the business support offer as it kind of evolves was probably the biggest theme, I think, to be fair. Richard and Mike, who were kind of leading our sessions. And that was about, you know, the one front door, how we can simplify grant systems. There was a bit about putting resources online for, you know, micro businesses to access when it's convenient. If a lot of that could be kind of video type content, you know, that just takes you through stuff rather than reading, that kind of simplicity was key there. There was an important point that particularly came out in the last session about the power of intermediaries, that those people that are supporting businesses, accountants, lawyers, other kind of advisors, etc. And then there was an echo that was again specific Shropshire, which is that lift across all of the county and the market towns. The one thing significant difference, I think particularly, it kind of came out as a peer-to-peer type, you know, business networks. That's the bit that's kind of been missing from a lot of the physical kind of restrictions we've all been having, and the connectivity to those networks. And there's that point, isn't it, of our kind of 16,000 odd businesses, 3/4 of them have got less than 5 people in them. So that whole ability to have that time and capacity to do that was a challenge. And someone mentioned, and it was a really quite interesting one, if you've seen Clarkson's Farm, everybody, there's a bit of a thought, which is, can we all have a cheerful Charlie? That person that just comes up and just says, right, you need to do this, this, and this, and goes away again. That kind of thing. So I think that was quite interesting. And then in terms of the SWOT, there is that thing about, what's missing, could we do anything? So that thing about spaces for businesses to grow, whether it's office spaces or others. The thing about skills and skill levels. And then there was a particular one about supporting people that are growing through the planning and development process. Because actually you can get kind of lost in that. So a bit of help kind of supporting people through that were our main themes, Carl.
Excellent. If you'd like to sit so everybody's looking at you, that'd be absolutely excellent. Yeah, it's like mastermind, isn't it? What's your specialist subject? Excellent. We will do. Thanks for that. Now the second one. This is over to Tracy Dark now, who's taking a look at the strategic locations, and there was lots certainly in the session I was sitting in here. So over to you.
So I think some of the findings and the gaps. Was about networking of businesses. So a number of businesses have started through COVID pandemic, or even existing businesses have found they've felt quite isolated, and that connection across to other businesses, talked about here today, seeing people at long last and picking up links really across sectors. So I think that's quite important, how we can do more of that. So it feels to us that we have been doing a lot of it, and I think the LEP have been doing a lot of it, but there's clearly, a gap. And then also the importance of the sense of place, about, people wanting to live here and work here, I think is important. And then also a strong theme around transport was discussed in all of the groups. How can we help people to be able to get to jobs better, particularly in our rural areas. So that transport connectivity is really, really important. And that takes us on to the sort of key opportunities and challenges around that attractiveness of place and uniqueness of place. Also plays into how difficult it can be to get people to jobs and people in our rural areas to jobs. Again, we talked a lot today about, the cost of that, getting the job has always been the difficult bit. It feels like that almost is the easy bit now. So how can we afford to get to the place to work? It's too expensive. So therefore it sort of fails at the first hurdle. So that needs to be thought about differently. Again, about other opportunities and challenges for key workers. Again, some of our big sectors like NHS struggling really to recruit people because it's too expensive to live here. So how can we all do more around providing homes for key workers? We've got policies in our local plan, and we'll see those sort of flow through as we go through the examination. So I think that's, again, quite significant. And then I think the one big thing that can make a significant difference, I think it's two big things. It's transport and digital connectivity. Again, a lot of discussion in the groups that I was in about digital connectivity. Areas in Shropshire where there's no connection. Businesses are just not going to go to those areas. So how can we bridge that gap, really? And I know Chris Taylor talked about, the 1,400 properties. 1,400 is quite a lot if you're one of those, and your children that live in those areas, education and flowing through to that. So again, it's the two things. And we also, and would be a bit of a plug as well, on the £97 million Bus Back Better bid that we've just put in. I think that demonstrates, that the council with its partners is really trying to push on that sort of agenda. And then I think on the sort of SWOT bit, really one of the key things is about supporting young people into jobs, as I've said, but also older people into jobs, where people have made those different lifestyle choices and want to, bored with the job they had. Things all feel completely different, COVID pandemic. I want to take my hobby into something that I do all the time, start my own business, and how we can support people, the over 50s, for example, in sort of, I suppose, recognising those ambitions and aspirations they've always had, and now they've taken that opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. That's great. 2 seats left on our panel. I'd like to just introduce now for the first time today the man who's been keeping an eye on our employment and skills debate, and that's the Principal and Chief Executive of Shrewsbury Colleges Group. Give him a round of applause, James Staniforth.
I'm not sure it warranted a round of applause, but thank you very much all the same. That's great. So, I mean, in terms of the feedback from the Employment and Skills Group, I think one of the issues that was apparent to us was we're talking about 5 years, or are we talking about sort of 25 years after Mark's comments earlier about, you know, what are the skills and the jobs of the future. But in terms of the gaps that we were hearing about, it was the importance of retraining that 25 to 54 age group, reskilling and upskilling them, as well as the earlier age group and the later age group, particularly because perhaps that 25 to 54 age group would have those needs in the future, around the 47% of jobs that don't exist. Probably some more thought around young people's understanding of work, including the benefits of the county of Shropshire and remaining here and the way in which a career can develop. The viability of training in an SME ecosystem, the problems that there are around bespoke training that's required for a particular company against what's funded, what's regulated, and the type of generic training that's often available through sort of government funded providers. And we've heard already about travel and travel infrastructure to support access to education and skills, and indeed for business was something that came through for us as well. In terms of opportunities and challenges, the need to retain and attract talented young people was a theme that was picked up on. Probably in a couple of ways. There was some discussion in more than one group about the chance to develop more rapidly Shrewsbury as a university town, and the way in which that would benefit the economy. There's implications there around the movement of people in and out and around lifestyle. And a point that I think was made earlier as well at the start about businesses taking on board the value of sponsoring young people so that we can connect them to our county rather than allowing them to disappear. I mean, as a principal of a college, I'm acutely aware of the fact that I've just sent 800 young people off to university. 20 are still in Shropshire. A lot of discussion, I think, around the awareness of the range and breadth of need and the range and breadth of the offer that exists. And there was a question which came in from outside, which was potentially this is an issue around communications and perception rather than the reality. Are we clear enough about mapping out what it is that we do and making people aware of that? Meeting the future needs, sort of about the known unknowns, but particularly thinking about the green industries and the opportunities that there are there. And there's that question around supply and demand. I mean, are we creating supply in a demand-led system, and is that something that's going to be resolved relatively easily, or something that's going to require much more thinking? And then finally, on the opportunities and challenges around digital, the way in which perhaps initial entry-level job-specific training could be delivered, utilising what we've learnt over the last 18 months, but alongside that recognition that face-to-face education is the sort of the optimal model because of the importance of relationships. And also some discussion around the way in which there's actually a national-international market now for people who may very well work for businesses in Shropshire, but equally there's people who are perhaps recognising that the benefits of city living are not quite as strong as they thought they were, and that opportunity to think about lifestyle and to return and still work digitally within Shropshire was one of the interesting considerations. So what would make a difference? I think access to funding, but also the time to facilitate training, the pressure on SMEs where everybody is working at full pelt because of the difficulty of recruiting people and having people that are sort of ready to go when they are recruited. The question about business being clear about their demands and understanding of what was available in the ecosystem, and then finally that point which I think has come through everybody's feedback, which is about infrastructure, the infrastructure around digital connectivity, but also around transport. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. I won't ask for another round of applause. You're done. So that's one seat left on the panel then. I'd like to invite back Councillor Ed Potter, who we heard from right at the start, to bring another perspective to the debate. We just want to spend the next 15 minutes really trying to if possible, summarise all of this. This is your opportunity to ask the panel any particular follow-up questions or just comment on anything that you've heard. I've got a few questions that have come in from our streaming audience, and thank you very much for those, which I can throw in your direction. But does anybody in the room want to start us off? Are there any particular burning question? That the first one's always the hardest one to ask, isn't it? If not, I'll start off with one of our streaming questions. Okay, I'll start off with one of our stream questions. Well, in fact, it's two or three, because we heard from Sally Thieman's commented actually from good to great right at the start, to saying she wanted to highlight, thought it was important to highlight the amount of support which is available to people who want to go in a different direction as a result of what's happened in the last 18 months, start up a business as a result of taking different choices. But then there was a couple of other people who commented on, do we need to be doing more to signpost people to where they need to start to look for things when they do want help? Is there almost too much out of there? Do we need to join things up more? Who wants to go on that one? Go on, Mark. Yeah, okay.
I think that echoes part of that discussion in that group about that simplification. Firstly, where do I go is a question for a lot of people, and once they get there, how simple is it to navigate? I think that's what we've got to aspire to do. The point was made in one group about, and that's the point about intermediaries. Actually, there are people also that are interfacing with business that can help that by just making that connection. And of course there is this churn, remember, and there's this kind of start-up rate. So you've got to keep doing it because business is changing all the time as well. So I think those are the kind of key things. So I think it's a great question. The point is we've always got to do more, but we've got to make it more simpler.
We'll go right to left to start with. Tracy, go on.
Yeah, and I think what was really fascinating around at the very beginning of COVID pandemic was how businesses turned to the local authority very quickly for support, collectively. What do we do? How can you help us? And certainly at Shropshire Council and the authority I was working at the time, put in measures really to wrap around those businesses and bring it all together. And I think that economic task force has continued on with that work. But there's, it's about where's the front door for businesses, and we perhaps need to be a bit clearer about that. We would always say, well, come to the local authority. There's the growth hub as well, so businesses can come there, and there's a whole raft of support that they can get. There's business events, and certainly Emma in my team has said it's just been huge. Businesses have really sort of looked towards the growth hub for that support. So there's quite a lot out there. It's just it's just knowing that front door, where to go for businesses, and being a bit clearer about that, which is something we need to take away.
James, where are you on this one?
Well, I think there's probably 2 points that it's worth making. One is that colleges, talking really now, from that college perspective, we're able to deliver anything that business requires. The challenge is that business is going to have to invest in what it is that they want us to deliver. And if what a business requires is the investment from government funding streams, what comes with that is a level of regulation and a definition that is perhaps not meeting the bespoke need of the individual company. Now, one of the ways in which I think a county deal would be really powerful, having had conversations with Mark about this, is if we had some exemptions from some of the regulations around the way in which adult funding was used, we could much better meet local need and demand. And then the answer to the question is, your local college is your one-stop shop. You give us a call and we'll put in place what it is that you need. But at the moment, we can do that, but to do that, we need you to recognise that there are things that we will have to put in place that perhaps will have to be paid for by the employer rather than by the government.
And in the panel debate that I sat in from this, there was a question about, should there be more of an onus on business to actually communicate with colleges and higher education, to actually tell them what it is they specifically want?
I mean, it's always helpful. I mean, any form of dialogue, and talking more is always better than talking less. I mean, I think businesses are pretty good at telling us the things that we need, but it changes, doesn't it? So it's a constant dialogue, and I think it's really important that's what takes place. I mean, as a college, we work with about 200 employers in Shropshire, about 300 in total.
Ed, any thoughts on
I think one of the things that came out in some of the discussions we had was that businesses, particularly new businesses or people running small businesses, don't necessarily see themselves as business owners, and it's actually how can we simplify the messaging of what is available And then, for example, if they want to access some of the grants, you know, that is often very off-putting. It almost closes the door straight away about filling them out. So whether there's opportunities around video streaming to demonstrate how to fill in the grant forms, where there's support, and also using case studies from successful businesses elsewhere, sort of the peer-to-peer. But I think there's an opportunity there around sort of the video streaming element, because nowadays, if you want to find out how to do something, you often turn to that mechanism to work out how to change the clock on the cooker, for example, when the clocks change. It provides you with that at the fingertips information that's readily available. And I think there's plenty of opportunities there in Shropshire to do that. So people starting new businesses or existing businesses wanting to grow, access grant funding and the wider support that's out there, they can do that quite easily.
If you've got a tutorial on the clock and the cooker, let me know, we'll talk later, because I can't do that either. Is there a debate to be had as a result of this about maybe the need to simplify? Is there too much information out there, perhaps, or not?
There is, and it's a difficult landscape, isn't it? Because you've got to remember that, you know, some of the business support organisations are also membership organisations, and there's a subscription part to that. But it's all part of that rich tapestry of where you go to that works for you. I think from my perspective, it's how do we just get it all to kind of work together really well. So it's not kind of treading on any toes, it's just the collective kind of lift. You know, and it's in our interest that all those, whether it's trade bodies or sector representation organisations or the Growth Hub, that they're all kind of, you know, lifting in some way. But the key bit is, if you want support, you know, how simple is it to kind of access it? Now, in some ways, is there no wrong front door? So if they turn to Richard or they turn to Mike or they turn to the Growth Hub, actually that doesn't mean it's the wrong door. If it's beyond any one of their reaches, they'll signpost it seamlessly in the back. Likewise, that's what the Growth Hub, I think, should be doing. It's kind of that thing about, you know, if the really elegant systems are the one where all the stuff happens behind the curtain. And that's the kind of challenge for me. I think that's the sort of space that we can get into. And why reinvent the wheel? So if there's somebody out there with a particular strength on, let's say, import, export, kind of, you know, helping people through it, well, let's not recreate that somewhere else. Let's build on the strength that we've got. It's those kind of principles.
Got some questions coming in. Gentleman at the back, if you can introduce yourself, tell us who you are. And
I don't know if I need a mic, so I'll just, Stuart Thomas from Berries. Obviously lots of fantastic ideas, initiatives, you know, some real energy and passion in the room. I just got a specific question about, I am going to use the mic, sorry. Just in terms of, you know, the context of that is that there's a tremendous amount of strain on the public purse, and the challenges of public sector funding are kind of evident and talked about an awful lot. So I'm just interested in the council's kind of strategy for making the money that they have available to them go further, and what ideas and thoughts you have around that.
Do you want to take that one, Ed, first? That's a constant quandary, isn't it?
Yeah. I think we're all acutely aware of the revenue challenges that local authorities face. And also, you know, if we're trying to put capital investment in, there is always going to be a revenue implication as well. So it is balancing that fine line. And ultimately, you know, a lot of the support that the council puts in isn't something that we have to do. Certain things we have to do, such as adult social care, children's social care. You know, those are our key priorities to make sure people are cared for and kept safe within Shropshire. However, you know, we recognise that it is very important that we support the economic development of Shropshire. We support businesses to provide growth, to provide employment, and hopefully, as we discussed it in one of the earlier sessions, that if we can keep people who are living in Shropshire in their own homes longer without needing the support of, say, social care or pressures on the NHS, that's vitally important. And we've all got a role to play in that, whether it be the local authority, whether it be the private sector, whether it be innovation, whether it be people providing the right sort of housing within the county. So it is a fine balance with how can we can balance that with the constraints we have. And I think there's no easy answer. We have to navigate what is put in front of us in terms of the budgets and the budgets we're faced, the not having the long-term guarantees around fairer funding and things like that. It is almost hand to mouth in some respects, and I think we'd all like to have a bit more certainty moving forward. But this is why it's really important we have this collaborative working, and I think this is something that's come out of the Economic Recovery Partnership, is that is starting to build and something we can take forward, hopefully.
And Tracy, I'd written down access to finance / funding as one of the half a dozen main bullet points from listening to all the debates today. So
Exactly. And the local authority, I think there's the expectation that you come to the local authority, they'll have money and they'll invest in. And I think it's just that different way now that that isn't the case always. So it's about how can we sometimes match fund things. How can we support a business maybe with matching what they're doing, or alternatively helping them put in bids as well. So speaking to somebody yesterday, the starting point was we need money. Well, we haven't got it to support that scheme, but we can help you submit a bid. We can support you through that. So I think it's just looking at creative and innovative ways of helping each other. It isn't always that the council has a big pot of money that we can just chuck at any scheme. So so I think it's just looking at it in a wider way.
put your thinking caps on, because I'm going to ask you in about 5 or 6 minutes one big question before we sum up. If money was no object, what would you want for Shropshire? What would be your number one absolute point? So have a little think about that. Before we do, I mean, James, you touched on funding for some of the help for businesses in education before, didn't you? Is it flexible enough to give Shropshire businesses what they want, do you think, at the moment?
No, because there's huge amounts of regulation and auditing of which is appropriate, but the level of regulation means that it meets the needs which are identified at a top level in central government. It doesn't focus on what the needs are of an individual county, and a lot of education policy is very London-centric and very metro-centric. I mean, the biggest challenge really for us with our 16 to 18-year-olds is transport and people being able to access education post-16. The local authority does provide support with that, but that would be one thing that I would certainly ask for, as being something further. And in Manchester, there is free 16 to 18 travel. In London, there's free 16 to 18 travel. It's ridiculous. It's a statutory requirement that you're in education or training to the age of 18, and yet it isn't funded to the age of 18 with support for transport.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question over here.
Thank you, Julian Dean and Councillor. Coming back to the big slogan on the wall, invest in Shropshire, I'm just interested, you've talked about the difficulties with public money, but Ed's first slide told us that actually the amount of private money that is getting invested in Shropshire was above target. I recently heard Dean Carroll saying, that actually green investment is the most reliable investment, and there are people in the county who want to invest. Is there something that can be done to help people invest in the journey to zero carbon in the county? The people who have pots of money and are looking for those opportunities to bring together the businesses that are on that journey with those people here who are looking to invest.
Who wants to go first on that one?
You're looking at me.
I am. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a complex answer to that in some ways. I mean, for me, part of it is how can we help bring the infrastructure into the county that then other people can use and access. So, for example, one of the things that we're looking at is, if we could switch the bus fleet into a hydrogen-fueled fleet, could that create, hydrogen generation facility, green hydrogen locally, that then other kind of people could kind of access to, including, not just large vehicles, but smaller vehicles too. So there's a bit about being a catalyst for some private sector infrastructure investment. There's another bit about, and one of the things that James and I have talked about is as we're developing, bigger clusters of kind of skills around things like air source heat pumps and, PV panels and, other forms of, low carbon technology, actually, where do the people that work in those industries get that skill uplift from? And the kind of like, almost like evening CPD, programs for the existing suite of plumbers who may want to convert into someone who knows how to do ground source heat pump. That's a kind of a space that we can kind of start to think about how we enable. So I think our role is really an enabling kind of role. We just kind of try and get all the conditions in place that allow businesses to get on with it and allow the demand to be released, really. Of course, there isn't, as you know, a kind of a coordinated single pot of cash for this that comes out of government. And I think there's always that challenge for how we put a green angle on that stuff. We all talk about the green and digital recovery. What does that really mean? I think it is a massive opportunity for us. And as long as we can kind of deliver that, actually we'll carry on going in the direction that we need. And ultimately, the minute we can help make it affordable for consumers to do things, then the whole thing takes off, doesn't it? That's the key bit. It's that spaceship that, you know, it takes all the power to leave Earth's orbit. It flies in space with next to no energy. It's that bit we've just got to help the whole green sector get to, I think.
And James, Mark mentioned you've been already in dialogue as well, so where are you on this one?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I'll give you an illustration which goes back to the point I made a moment ago. We opened a new automotive engineering centre at our London Road campus, which is a really good example of the college investing its money, support from the local, from the Marchers Let, and support from local businesses. To the areas that we've got really state-of-the-art equipment for our hybrid and electrical technology. The qualifications nationally have taken out hybrid technology. So we don't actually need to train people to qualify as motor vehicle technicians in that technology. We are still going to do so because it's what's needed and it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. But actually, there is the potential that the funding doesn't ask us to do that, and the way in which we're regulated doesn't ask us to do that. So we're having to rely on the fact that common sense will prevail when somebody looks at what it is that we're doing with that group of students. Running alongside that, then, yes, we absolutely do need to be looking at these particular areas of work. Need to be minded that if you're looking at, say, apprenticeships in plumbing, where new standards are looking at new technologies, of course, people still have old boilers. And therefore, you do still need to have people who are trained with those skills until that change has been made. But we absolutely, as a college, want to be at the front of this change that Mark's talking about, and working with the local authority and working with business on providing that type of training. I think is a really exciting part of the sort of the 5-year and the 25-year future.
And Ed, it sort of brings in that, doesn't it, the whole issue about making sure everything's joined up properly, doesn't it?
I think there's a bit around clustering our green industries. We don't have many of our industries and businesses clustered within Shropshire. We have a lot of green businesses that are very widely dispersed. Bringing them together, being a beacon as a county, look, you know, this is what we're doing, this is what we can achieve, bringing together our existing businesses and also helping to attract new businesses into the county as well by providing those opportunities. That could be facilitated both through the local authority and also through the private sector as well.
I'm conscious of the time, and I want to ask you about your money no object question in a moment, but I know we've got time for one last question from the back.
Hi, Ray Flynn, University of Wolverhampton. Really interesting conversation, discussion today, and it's going to point a very exciting trajectory. And it got me thinking about kind of 2027 and the conversations which were kind of interlaced with references to the future and young people. And I guess my question really is where the young person's voice is in the direction of travel. You know, this is setting kind of conditions up to 2027 where kind of older mid-teenagers will be the entrepreneurs of the future. And it's just where do they fit into the exercise, really.
I was going to come to Tracy first, but I guess I ought to go to James first on that one, hadn't I? So.
Well, I mean, you're assuming that I've got a good answer to that question. I mean, I think it goes back to the point I made earlier that are we talking about demand or supply? Are we talking about that very complex interrelationship between the two things? We have a demand-led system. Students will choose the things that they will study at the age of 14, at the age of 16, and at the age of 18. What we have to make sure is that they have sufficient advice and guidance and good quality information that allows them to make informed choices. So I think the point about the student voice is about making sure that they have a well-informed voice so that they can make clear what it is they want. I mean, ultimately, colleges absolutely, universities absolutely, schools to an extent will have a curriculum for young people that reflects what it is that they want to study. Because the way in which funding mechanisms work and regulatory systems work is we respond to that demand. The challenge is about making sure that people properly understand what the opportunities are with the particular pathways that they may go down. I mean, one of the things that I do in my day job is that I go and talk to year 11s in schools. And in fact, I couldn't go to a school this morning. They wanted to do it remotely. So before the start, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, I did a remote presentation to a school. There's a digital advancement that we've had over the last 18 months. And I make a point, which is that I put up all the different courses that we offer, and then I point out that there's one course where you can be earning £50,000 a year by the age of 18 or 19, because it's about skill, not about experience or age. And it's the bricklaying, because you can earn £1,000 a week if you can lay 1,000 bricks a day, because there is this desperate shortage. Now, since I've been saying that same thing for about 4 years. I've quadrupled the number of bricklayers that I've got. I've had to open two new brick centres, and I still can't meet the demand within Shropshire for those particular construction skills.
It's obviously working then, what you're saying. So.
Yeah, you've got to be careful, haven't you, what you say?
Yeah.
Tracy?
And I think just for this, this economic strategy, the economic prosperity that we're discussing today, I think, your question around how do young people engage in that process is a really important point. So today is the launch of the workshops and the consultation exercise we're going to be doing. And it's very much in our minds that we need to engage with young people so they input into this process because, of course, we have ideas around how we think young people are going to live their lives by the time they get to, to working age, but they may have a completely different perspective on it. And I think also the point that Mark made earlier in his presentation about, the jobs of the future, we don't actually know what they are here today, even for those that are in sort of primary school, just coming into secondary school already, their jobs may be jobs that we don't even know, don't even exist at the moment. So, they need to be at the table to talk about how they see their future. So I think that's a really important point.
Can I just make a point just to build on? This is an example that came from a conversation with the chief exec of Cisco. And that was that there are real recruitment issues for, high-quality telecommunication engineers. And only 18% of applications were coming from females. So they dropped the word engineer and they just talked about capabilities and skill levels and described the job in terms of, what impact it had. Instantly, overall levels went up. Instantly, the 50-50 balance in genders went up. And they got better quality applicants all round. And I think it's just really something interesting about the language we use when we describe what roles we're kind of trying to bring on and how we engage people. And that reaches down into when young people are making decisions, at year 6 and 7 quite often, there's a bit about, well, what are those options? And there is an issue about the careers advice that exists within the kind of schools community. And in my view, there's a bit about, maybe in that simplification bit we talked about, videos online and more information online. For me, that could be a really big opportunity. If we think about cascading more information to people making career choices and decisions, that could be really important. And the other side of it, I've got 2 girls that have been through university. I can't tell you how many of their friends emerged out of university with no idea what they wanted to do. They just kind of jumped on the conveyor belt without really any thought. And I think that's an issue for all of us, to really think about how we shape that interest. And it's often important to understand what you don't want to do as much as what you do want to do. And the whole work experience bit kind of, I think, plays a little bit in there. So that's a really big challenge for me.
Don't forget, dream project on your bucket list coming up in 30 seconds, but last word to Ed.
Yeah, just briefly on that, I think there's two ideas I think we could work on. One is our enterprise advisors that go into our education settings who provide schools with advice and support around bringing employers into schools, but also I think they can bring back the message from the young people back through that network to us as a local authority, but also to wider businesses about what young people want. And then secondly, I've spoken briefly with Tracy about this, and this might be news to the leader of the council, but I think we should be exploring the options of a youth council for Shropshire, where the voices of young people can be heard and represented. So I know that's something we've spoken about briefly, and that's something that I'd like to explore with the portfolio holder for young people in the county. So I think there's opportunities there to move that forward.
Excellent. Thanks, you folks. I'm going to come to you for your if money was no object question first, but let me throw it out to the floor first if anybody's got 3 or 4. This is going, I guess this will be the footnote on the report, the big asks question really. If money was no object and you could just ask for one thing for Shropshire right now, what would it be? Anybody want to? Richard, hold on, microphone coming. No. I know you can shout, but microphone. Our streaming audience needs to hear you, Richard.
I'd like to see a long-term approach to any financial support that comes into the area. And I'd like to see genuine local decision-making with the handcuffs off that stops influencing decision makers and guiding down particular routes that are delivered by central government. We should be able to make decisions that we can look after our own communities far, far better than we actually can, because behind the scenes, of course, there are all sorts of constraints. So kind of long-winded answer, but that would be the wish for me.
Excellent. Anybody else? I can see at least one more hand over there, maybe two. 1.5 hands, I think, over there. So
Money's no object. Free bus every hour, every village.
simple as that. Excellent.
An electrified Wolverhampton to Shrewsbury train line.
Oh, that got a murmur of approval, that did. That's good. Anybody else before I throw it out to the panel? Okay, go on, I'll go left to right this time. Ed?
I'd like to see fairer funding brought forward so that Shropshire would benefit from fairer funding, the fairer funding model, and I think that's something we deserve, and it would enable us as a local authority. It's a great place to live and work. There's no denying that. We all have our gripes, we all have our moans. We're very fortunate to live here, but that would make all our lives much easier, and it would certainly make our lives as councillors much easier.
James?
Well, it's partly for Shropshire, but it's going to sound very parochial. I need 120 million quid for a town centre campus, and I know exactly where it goes because it's one of the sites that have been vacated.
I thought you were going to say free public transport for everybody up to the age of 18.
That's been done.
Yes. Tracy?
And I think it's, for me, it's, you know, locking the doors and stopping our young people escaping out of Shropshire. So keeping them in Shropshire so that they develop their careers in Shropshire and develop our businesses in Shropshire.
I think this civil liberties approach is issues with that, isn't there, a little bit? But Mark?
A little bit of what Richard said, but I think firstly for me, I think business rates is a bust system. To be honest, I think, you know, we completely need a different way of kind of incentivising business growth. And then the other bit really is let's get a fair share of our funding pie, whatever that is, you know, that kind of sense of, you know, Shropshire getting its equal and fair share of whatever exists nationally. We've got to fight for that with as much flexibility, you know. So think of it like this. 95% of all tax raised from business goes directly to government. The other 5% is business rates. Half of that goes to government. Only 2.5% of all taxes from business has any kind of local degree on it. You know, you guys should be able to influence where some of the tax that business grows from. That would be my wish, that we have a different fiscal system with more local flexibility too.
Excellent. Thanks for all your questions. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch with us on the streaming service as well. And thanks to our panel. Mark's going to stay around for some closing remarks, but can we just say thanks to our other three panellists? You can go and take a comfy chair. Thank you very much, folks. Have a lectern, have a chair, however you want it, sir.
I think there are 2 slides, so I just need to push a button. So firstly, I'll just go back. Firstly, thank you, everybody, for your engagement in this, both those in the room and those online. It's been an incredibly engaging and energetic and vibrant kind of session this morning. So really thanks for the contribution that you made from everybody. And it'd be remiss, wouldn't me, not publicly to thank the team that have put this on. You know, it's huge. Thanks to support everybody for that. This is just a kind of one of those usual things, reminders, you know, please, you know, we want to get your feedback forms. We want to make sure this information is shared as wide as possible. So the website, investinshropshire.gov, you know, that's where materials will be. You can either leave your, you know, that handwritten form filled in here now, or go online and do that. Any other feedback, any inspirations? I was part of an interview with somebody recently who said, well, I don't make decisions quickly. I like to think overnight and come back. He didn't get the job. But nevertheless, we all kind of like think a bit like that, don't we? Some of us will be hanging around for a little bit here if there's anything that you want to catch up with us. And if we can get all of that by the 10th of November, then we will have a playback. So I think that's one of the interesting things, Carl, is that sense of, well, what's happened? We took part in that. What's happening with it? You know, feed that back to us. And then This is just kind of helping you understand what we see as the time frame around the strategy. So, you know, we're going to gather all of those comments up until the beginning of December, finish the SWOT analysis and get that on the website by the 17th of December. And then we're going to kind of work with the task force members to kind of bring that together into a kind of an outline framework for a strategy, and we've got UCS kind of supporting that too with some of their economists and business school people, which is great. And then hopefully we'll get a draft out which will play to the business community in the spring. We want that consultation, we want people to kind of own it, and then we can finalise it for, you know, the middle of next year. So we're on quite a tight time frame, actually. The way that we, back to the resources question also, is in our world, you know, resources follow priorities, so great to make sure we get the right priorities in there. In terms of funny money from government, there is nothing like having a solid base of evidence with businesses engaged, that when you hold up the mirror, we could go and say, we want to do this, government, and we know our businesses are supporting this because here's our evidence base. So really important to contribute. And feel free to, you know, tweet, blog, whatever, say positive things about this whole process, because this is a journey that we're all on, isn't it? And people own what they help build, so let's engage us beyond this room. There's a lot of other people out there that we need to engage. And one of the questions we were talking about is similar sessions beyond this in other areas that we can just kind of take. Maybe some of them in the early evening, where, you know, recognising that people are at work, etc. And then we can get that kind of full engagement. So that's our time frame. Hopefully we can keep that momentum and that kind of sense of, you know, real kind of confidence that we've got and carry it forward. So there you go. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. I didn't need my crook after all today, which is good news, isn't it? Yeah, so that's pretty much it for today, folks. It just remains really for me to say thanks to everybody for coming here today. Thanks to everybody that's been watching on the stream and for everybody who's been posing their questions. If the people in the room want to see themselves on the telly, this will actually be available to watch on a catch-up for about a week or so. And as Mark says, you know, the whole point, the big takeaway I think I've got from today is that, you know, quite obviously all the partners involved today want to strike up dialogue with you. They want to talk to you. They want to find out what it is that you feel and get your feedback on things. So thanks to the guys from Yarrington as ever for making the presentation work as seamlessly as ever today. And hopefully you've got something out of this. And we'll see you sometime soon. Thank you very much indeed.